Hey everyone, look up in the sky. What is that up there? Is it a bird, a plane, a meteor? No, it's DeepSeek. You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hi everyone, happy Tuesday. It's Alan Schimmel here at Techstrong Gang. You know, there are some days where I'm just so damn excited to be on here to talk about stuff because the world is exciting. Whether you like what's going on in the world or not like what's going on in the world, there's arguments to be made on both sides, but it's nevertheless exciting. I guess it proves that old Irish proverb written by Mike Vizard's great-grandpa, "May you live in interesting times." Um, Speaking of Mike Vizard, let me introduce our fantastic Techstrong Gang lineup for us today as we delve into some really important subjects. I mentioned him, so I might as well go there. He's not back in Ireland. He's actually up in upstate New York, as we call it, from Long Island. He's our Chief Content Officer, Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike, how are you?
By that definition, the Bronx is upstate. So there
Pretty
you go.
much, yeah. Well, only the northern Bronx. Like Yankee Stadium was still the city, but once you got up like Bronxville, up that area, that was already upstate. Um, anyway, joining Mike and I, we have our Ohio contingent. They're both regular gang members, part of our Futurum Brotherhood and of Tech Field Day. She is the editor of Techstrong AI and Gestalt IT, Salagna Saha. Hi, Salagna, welcome, and thanks for being on with us today.
Hi, Alan. Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
Great to have you. And then joining Salagna, he's the founder of Tech Field Day and still its president, running the show over there, our friend Stephen Foskett. Stephen, good to see you.
It's nice to be here. I'm not sure geographically, but we might have just gone north to south. Could be.
From Mike to you to the Ohio
I guess,
folks.
because Salagna's a little north of me.
Oh, okay. Well, look, I didn't have my Google Maps on and stuff. I just wing it. Anyway,
Pretty close.
and then certainly heading south. That I know for sure. Coming down here to the Boca Raton studios, we're joined by our everything green and sustainability analyst and editor, the one and only Bonnie Schneider. Hi, Bonnie. How are you?
I'm well, Alan. Great to be here.
Great to be here. And of course, as I said, I'm Alan Schimmel, if you don't know. And we're here now. So, anything happening in the news today, guys?
There's this little startup thing called DeepSeek that everybody's flipping out about. Stock prices are dropping through the floor, and the issue is they created a AI model that is, I don't know, maybe a tenth the cost of what everybody else is producing it for. I'm just estimating off the top of my head, but folks are saying that they've created some new technique for training these AI models. They have not said what that is exactly, so everybody's scratching their head about how this thing works a little bit, but it's pretty clear that the cost of AI is coming down, and it's all open source, so people are testing it and using it like crazy. But Alan, I know you've been following this, so what's your thoughts here?
Absolutely. You know, there's circles within circles here, and you know, it's such an interesting story, not just from the technology perspective, but from the nation state strategic perspective, from the winning of the hearts and minds battle perspective here for AI, as well as the financial perspective. You know, I wrote what I think is a great article, if I say so myself. It's out on techstrong.ai, and it talks about necessity being the mother of invention. So, Mike, I've got to. I don't necessarily agree with you that the retraining techniques was so obscured as to not understand what they were doing. I think time will tell. I think, you know, there's so much to this. Let's try to build the case as if I was back in law school, and we'll start, you know, at that general foundational layer. What the folks, this company did, DeepSeek, Chinese-backed company, in a matter of a couple months and for a mere few million, $6 million or something, they claim to have built a, AI that rivals ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Llama, and all the best that the Western AI companies have done at a cost of $1 trillion or so, or whatever it is. And they did it not with the latest, greatest, honkinest GPUs from Jensen and the NVIDIA folks, but with relatively much more modest hardware. They did it not with these elaborate training kind of machinations that take months and years, but in a matter of weeks, using this retraining technique, as they call it. And then for the cherry on the top of the cake, they released it all, or if you believe, you're entitled to your opinion. They released it all under an open source license, and a real open source license, not some cockamamie fake open source license, but a real open source license, which will allow the world to verify this scientific method at its best. We could run this in labs. We could see what works, what doesn't work. Are they telling the truth? Are they not telling the truth? So that's at our base layer, right? Then the intrigue and the machinations come in. A country that just said we're putting $500 billion into buying or building AI data centers and energy production says, oh no, we can't let this happen. This will ruin the whole thing. And immediately you start seeing, well, the Chinese have done this before. This sounds like cold fusion. This is, a ploy. They're using forced labor. So the numbers aren't really true. Maybe. Why did the Chinese open source it? Obviously to try to kneecap the Western AI industry. Very likely. But here's the bottom line. Who benefits from this? I'll tell you who benefits from it, the consumers. Because ultimately in this war, for lack of a better word, and war doesn't necessarily mean guns, but in this battle of AI supremacy, as I think Satya Nadella at Microsoft said, we will all win because AI will become more ingrained into what we do. We will use it more. If it's easier to do, we all win for that. Now, there are some out there, though, who, looking at this under the guise of nation-state strategic initiatives and advantages, are just going to refuse to accept it. I think there's another argument to be made that perhaps if we didn't hold it so close to the vest and made it available to other countries, maybe this experimentation wouldn't go on, or maybe it's the inevitable necessity is the mother of invention, as I wrote in my article. By the way, that article's on Techstrong.ai. There's another good article there from John Swartz that was written prior, actually last Friday. You can check that out as well, and I'm sure we'll have more coverage, especially as the shockwaves of this reverberate around the globe. Anyway, I'll throw it open to the panel here for your thoughts.
So the part that I like about this is the open source side of it, and that theoretically, at least, we should be able to replicate the results, and somebody else might use the same techniques to create additional models, and that would be awesome because other folks, in addition to all the things that you just said, are going to be a little bit wiggy about using an AI model directly from China because we're busily ripping out every telecom piece of equipment we can find from those guys. So I really hope that this is the way it works out, but I'd like to see the scientific proof and then I'll be happy. Steven, I don't know what you think.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a few different aspects to this story that are interesting. I mean, and we've touched on most of them here already. Certainly one of the questions is, how did they do it? This thing exists. It's the most downloaded model in Hugging Face, apparently, and everybody's trying it out and experimenting with it, playing with it. So it's not like we can pretend that this didn't happen. It happened. How did they do it? We don't know. And I think that of all the controversies here, the how did they do it question may be the most salient controversy. In other words, it would be very appropriate, I suppose, in an international relations way for the Chinese government to want to stick a thumb in the eye of the US, just as the US is announcing big AI investments and tariffs and export controls and all this to say, look, we developed, we actually put this thing together with stone knives and paper, coat hangers, and it's just as good as anything you've got. I could completely see that from a political standpoint. And so we can't really truly know how they did it. I suspect that there's a lot of truth in what they're saying about how they did it, which is that they really relied on reinforcement learning. And furthermore, I suspect that the reinforcement learning leveraged a lot of the open source models and freely downloadable models that already exist out there. So if I was going to be training a new AI model, I would have it training in a classroom with Claude and Llama and all these, and let it let it do its thing with that as a way to train it. That may be how they did it, or it may be different. But setting aside how they did it and what they did it on, the next question is, did they do it on these export controlled H800s? Was it really just a small fraction of what one of these other companies would use? Again, we can't really know exactly for sure what they used to train it on, because, of course, there's a political implication of that too. In terms of access to technology and these export controls and so on. It is in their interests to say, "Hey, we put this together on 50 H800s. Ha ha." Did they? I don't know. You don't know. But
I
again, we
think
can maybe set that aside and let's look at the merits of the model. The model is really good. This is what's happening right now in AI, is that we have these companies like Meta, like Anthropic, like, like this model that are out there. They're freely available. People can build on them. People can use them. That's why I feel like the basic models are not the strategic advantage people think they are. And again, that would leads me to question this whole Stargate investment, because if we can have basic models that are freely available, and then we can retrain them or connect them with applications or build, a network of agents out of them or whatever, well, that benefits all of us, but it also kind of kickstarts this entire industry. And in a way that frankly doesn't benefit the people that are spending, billions of dollars to develop these basic models. Do we really need basic models? I don't know. Solagna, there's a whole bunch of articles on Techstrong AI about this thing. What do you think?
So my thoughts are the same really. Whatever combination of techniques they use, they made it happen within 2 years with a small team of people and with just a handful of GPUs. I do not know what combination of techniques, like engineering techniques, they use per se, but definitely it's been told that the experts who are studying the Chinese innovation, they say that it's smart combination of open source methodologies and software driven resource optimization. And obviously they used, interestingly, a small patch of candidates, like who are these are PhD students, and they do not have any industry experience. They just not seasoned AI engineers, so none of that. So these are individuals who are fresh out of university, eager to prove themselves, and really dedicate to the mission. So yeah, and none of these techniques that were used were novel, so to speak, but they mixed and matched them so well that that was half the job done, and the rest of it were, well, um, history. Everybody saw how impactful this thing is.
You know, I'd like to turn from the technology aspect of this. And, I was a political science and history major. And the implications here are stunning. couple of things. First of all through the Cold War, and I'm old enough to remember, as some of us here on the panel are, and some of us aren't, but you know, we were the Red Menace. We were brought up around the Red Menace. The Russians had more rockets than we did. They got to space first. Their planes were faster. And you know, in the rearview mirror of history, we found out we probably overestimated exactly how good the Russian technology was, right? They didn't have they may have had more numerically, excuse me, but the quality and sophistication were probably not what we had. That being said, they certainly they made more with less, right? Excuse me, where they didn't necessarily adopt digital technology for this rocket program. They did a hell of a job with the analogs. And their fighter jets maybe weren't as fancy electronically and cutting edges, maybe especially as, you know, the 70s turned to the 80s. But they were still damn good. And, you know, so while it wasn't the Red Menace that we were brought up to be, there was still something to be said for making do with what you have, and necessity being the mother of invention. And that's the whole point of my article, is that given what they had to work with here, never underestimate the ingenuity of the human mind and human nature. Nature abhors a vacuum, and where there's a will, there's a way. They figure it out. And you know what? I will tell you the truth. Historically, that was one of the things about America, right? We used to, you know, going back to the railroad era and the cars and you know, all of those things in the, let's say, mid 1800s through the mid 1900s, we figured out new, better, cheaper ways of doing things. It's not always the guy who spends the most money wins. And that's part of the American story too, is it, you know, if you could come up with a better mousetrap, good for you. You deserve what you get. And is this a better mousetrap? You know what? I don't even pretend to know enough about the technology and what happened here to tell you it's definitely a better mousetrap. But I will tell you it is a mousetrap that seems to catch mice as well as some of the other mousetraps out there right now. And until it's shown otherwise, I think it's just a fascinating story about the human condition, whether you're Chinese or Indian or American or Brazilian, or I don't care where you're from, we're all humans, and our curiosity and our drive to figure out and solve problems that's what makes us human. And so kudos to them for what they've done, assuming that the whole thing's not full of beans, right?
Well, assuming that it doesn't matter what they did per se, one of the things that we have seen is the open source community keeps closing the gap between their models and the proprietary models, and they keep closing it faster. And so these AI companies, they have a problem that goes beyond just what the Chinese are doing. They're investing billions of dollars to build AI models and then turning around 6 months later and the open source community is right on their heels. So
because the tighter you hold sand in your hand, the more the grains slip between your fingers. Somewhere Dr. Richard Stallman is dancing a jig, because that is the open source model.
I think it'd be great if some of the prices come down, if it creates more competition, because just one thing I've been watching is the prices keep going up as they add more features and you know, suck you into it. So I haven't tried it, the DeepSeek, but I'm curious to see the performance and of course the pricing.
Well, there are a couple other technical aspects to DeepSeek that I think are particularly interesting and worth calling out. I am doing AI field day tomorrow and the next day after all, and we've been studying this. A couple of things. Number one, to Bonnie's point, DeepSeek uses lower precision mathematics, which requires much less power and infrastructure on the inferencing side, as well as on the training side. And that is pretty valuable. And that's a trend that we've been seeing with AI models. I mean, the fact that you can run a deep learning model on your phone now shows that, you know, the power budget is dropping rapidly on the inferencing side. Another aspect of DeepSeek that I think is really interesting is that they're actually exposing the entire chain of thought as the model is trying to work out the answers to problems. Now, that's been something that has been a pretty closely guarded secret for companies like OpenAI. Even the models that do expose more chain of thought, you know, for example, you can make Llama from Meta expose some of that if you really work hard. You know, DeepSeek is doing that by default. And so you can really watch it doing the thing, which I think helps both in terms of giving us confidence in its answers, but also in terms of helping the next model develop, because we can see how this thing is working to some extent. And I think aspects like this are important, as well as the sort of big geopolitical questions of how did they do it and what does it mean for us. You know, the DeepSeek team has pointed out that we're all helping each other to develop better models, and they wouldn't have been able to do this if it hadn't been for the fact that much of the work of researchers up to this point has been exposed for the rest of the world to learn from. And so essentially they're trying to share their innovations and say, look, we can do it with pure reinforcement learning. We don't have to have supervised training of the model, that sort of thing. I think that's very, very cool, and it helps push the state of the art forward in a way that science is supposed to work.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to all the investor lawsuits that will be coming down the pike if this turns out to be true, because the investors are going to be, hey, you guys either should have known about this, or maybe you did know about this and you hoodwinked us. So,
well, all those investors that are counting on OpenAI to develop artificial general intelligence this year.
Right. It's coming. It's coming. So's quantum. I don't know.
not according to the NVIDIA CEO, quantum's not coming to be relevant for at least a decade.
Hey, there's the guy who said you needed the biggest, baddest processors to do AI. I know Jensen's credibility is taking a hit here. Anyway, hey, we've devoted a lot of time to this, but well worth it. I'm sure this won't be the last time we discuss it, but we need to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We're going to come back to our next block as we talk about it's Data Privacy Day. What are you doing to celebrate? You're watching Techstrong Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, folks, we're back. And yes, we are celebrating Data Privacy Day once again. I think we've been at this for almost, that feels like a decade. I'm not exactly sure how long. But in the age of AI, I think this is becoming a more pressing issue. Stephen, what's your assessment of the current state of data privacy? Because some of the younger generation would say there's no such thing.
Well, I think that that's a pretty cynical attitude, but I guess Gen Z can be forgiven for being cynical, considering that what they've been hearing all this time. Yeah, I am skeptical of declaring days. I don't know if you guys know it, but every week on the Gestalt IT Rundown on Wednesdays, we begin the show by pointing out some of the ludicrous days it is. It's National Spaghetti Day, National Girl Scout Cookie Day, whatever. You know, so Data Privacy Day does get my hackles raised, as the old men say, a little bit, as does the fact that the whole point of Data Privacy Day is to raise awareness. Yes, awareness and $1.89 will buy you a bean burrito at Taco Bell. It's not all that useful to raise awareness of things that people are already annoyed about and cynical about and resigned to. But that being said, that's my grumpy old man shouting at the clouds. Let me put on my regular hat here and say, yes, there's a lot of things in Data Privacy Day that we do need to focus on. Now, first off, I think that it's important to recognize that we do or should have some control over our personally identifiable information. I think most of us have experienced the joy or frustration of going to, I don't know, some sort of appointment and the form says, put your social security number here. And if you're like me, you go to the person and say, are you going to tax me? Well, then why do you need my social security number? And half the time the answer is, oh, we don't need that. We just ask for it. Well, right there is the problem with data privacy. We don't need that. We just ask for it. The next aspect is that most of this personally identifiable information is not stored in a secure way, at least here in the US. Now, I know in Europe they have strong penalties for not storing it securely, but I question whether those penalties are actually having the impact that they could have, because I suspect that many of it's still not stored securely over there. And in other countries, well, who knows what the laws are and who knows what the practices are. I suspect that in many cases, this stuff is, PII is stored wide open. Sure seems to be because of all these massive data breaches. As my friend Troy Hunt and Have I Been Pwned exposed, there are data breaches all the time. And all of us get caught up with them. And there again, I mean, it's easy to become cynical when the answer to a data breach is, here's a free year of credit monitoring from a company that's going to try to sell you stuff. Awesome. That's really going to help me. So I love the idea. I love the spirit. I love the heart of Data Privacy Day. But the truth is, we do live in a cynical time, and I'm not surprised that people are cynical about data privacy.
I have a thought or two on this. So I'm really glad we have a Data Privacy Day one day a year, but we should give a crap the other 364 days a year too. But that being said, when I think of data privacy, I don't think just of PII. I think from a corporate level, right? Data represents the crown jewels of so many of us for our organizations. And if we don't handle that data, someone's liable to steal it, use it to build an open source model and sink the whole ship. Right? It's happened. That being said, Stephen, I agree with you. Social security numbers were never meant to be unique identifiers for ID. It was really just so you have, it's like your account number in the bank of Social Security. And I wish we would get away from Social Security numbers as a unique identifier. I do take umbrage, though, in terms of the GDPR. I think whether you're based in Europe or not, you are subject to GDPR if you're doing business on the internet. That's the reality of it. Very few companies can get away with saying, oh, well, we're not in Europe, we don't participate. Bullcrap. You've got customers in Europe, you have customers of customers in Europe, you're subject to it. I think a lot of people do store PII in encrypted or secure locations. I just think the bad guys, the way most of these data breaches happen today is via a phishing attack. And so, Stephen, not to pick on you, but if I'm able to log into Tech Field Day encrypted data as Stephen Foskett because I was able to get your credentials, I have access to the whole thing. Very few attacks are sort of brute forced, and we read about them sometimes, right? You'll hear about a brute force attack, and I got salted, data that I could work on for the next 300 years to decrypt until Jensen tells us it's okay, and then quantum is real, and we'll use quantum to break it. But that's not the way most hacks take place. They take place with credentials that give them access to unencrypt the encrypted data that they're grabbing. Now, that being said, as I said right from the outset, I appreciate the gesture of calling attention to Data Privacy Day. I think it made more sense 10 or 15 years ago when we really had a problem getting people to focus in on security. Its time has probably passed.
I don't know.
Every day is Data Privacy Day.
I would argue the tenor of the conversation needs to change, and I think Stephen touched on it a little bit with the whole Social Security thing. But too many organizations think that the data that they collect is now their data, and they don't really think about it as they are the stewards of data that belongs to somebody else, and they're being trusted with something, and then they don't manage it well because then they give it to developers to code stuff, and then they give it to salespeople to shove it in a spreadsheet somewhere in an unprotected file, and they're just cavalier with the whole thing. I remember talking to one guy recently who's a developer in a bank, and they would know how much money Celtics players had in their account because they were just kind of using that data to help build their next generation of applications, and they had no business knowing it or no requirement for knowing it. I just think that the issue isn't so much the way we secure the data, it's just how we think about what the responsibility is.
I totally agree with you, Mike, and Stephen as well. Uh, I feel like that when data is getting collected from customers, it needs to be on a need per basis. Like if you need it, collect it. If you don't, then don't. Because we have all seen the downside of playing fast and loose with public data, public information, sensitive data, and things like that. And also sometimes companies rely on third party collectors who aren't always the most mindful about the security of that data. So yeah, I feel like that there needs to be some sort of oversight on what data is being collected and how it is being handled within the organization as it passes on from team to team.
And how it's being sold, right? From company to company. That's always such a big issue. That's why I hate giving my phone number to any store because you'll get so many spam calls after that from people you never heard of.
Let me give you a real world example, though, that happened to me this weekend. Well, not to me, to my wife, Bonnie. But if it happens to her, it happens to me too. When you're married, as long as we are, it happens. But anyway, we get a letter in the mail from from a company called the Garden of Life. I don't know if you guys are familiar. The Garden of Life are people who make like protein powder. My wife's much more healthier than I am, and so she does all of that. And it seems the Garden of Life was breached, and Bonnie's PII was stolen. Her name, our address, not her social security number, but her credit card number, and that she used to use there, her email and so forth. We've all gotten these letters, I'm sure. I usually get one a week or so from some organization or company we do business with. And like most of these letters, it says, good news, we're going to give you a free year of monitoring. Now, it used to be you would go to like Experian or Equifax and you'd sign up and or TransUnion, you get your free year of them giving you alerts. But no, now there's a cottage industry of companies who do this sort of thing for companies who are victims of breach. In this case, the company was called IDX. Bonnie, I said, well, Bonnie, you got to go fill it out and get your year of monitoring. She came back. She said, Alan, they're asking all these questions. I don't understand why they need this information. I said, what do you mean? Let me check it out. I log on. I scan the QR code, put everything in. It says, great, Bonnie, sorry about the breach of Garden of Life. They've hired us. We're here to help. And it then proceeds to ask her all of these questions about her financial accounts,
Oh my God.
bank accounts, and everything else under the guise of protecting her. I said, quite frankly, I said, fuck this. We're not doing this. We're already a victim of a breach. Why would I be giving you all this information? Do me a favor. If you see her information anywhere, her name or email address, you let me know. Until then, just,
Well, if I can,
F up.
if I could suggest a couple of tools, a couple of specific tools for people, let me just do that. So first off, I mentioned Have I Been Pawned? That's a great site to see if your email address is included in any data dumps. I strongly recommend signing up. It's free, it's legit, it is respectable. Use it. The second thing is the only thing you should go to for a credit report is annualcreditreport.com. If you're in the US, outside the US, I don't know. But inside the US, there's a website called annualcreditreport.com, which is the actual US government one. And there's like 50 fake
Hasn't been shut
fraudulent
down yet?
Milan's nonsense. No, it hasn't been shut down yet. That sound like it, like freecreditreport.com, all that. They're all well, not scams, but businesses trying to take advantage of you. Annualcreditreport.com is the real one run by the US government. You can get your credit report, as it says, every year. You can actually get it every 4 months from each of the 3 credit agencies. So that's what I do, is every 4 months I download my credit report for free from the actual government one. The other thing is you can sign up for free in the US on TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. You can navigate your way through there and get a free account, and then you can freeze your credit. And you should all have your credit frozen at all times, because it is really the only way to protect yourself from fraud and scams. And even then, it may not work. My wife had her a payday lender lent somebody some money using her stolen information, even though her credit was frozen. And they keep coming back to her now saying, "Hey, you owe us this money," as they sell it to yet another bottom dweller. But the point is, those are basically some legit resources that you should use. I would never sign up for some random service that is randomly saying that it's going to protect me, if only I give it even more information. So back to the subject at hand, Data Privacy Day. Let's keep our data private. Let's not give it out as much as we possibly can.
And happy Data Privacy Day to you. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong Gang. We're going to come back. We're going to end up with the future of farming from our very own farm gal, Bonnie Schneider. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Welcome back to the Techstrong Gang. We all love fresh fruits and vegetables, well, mainly vegetables in this case, but you might think you have to go to a farm way outside of a city to get them. But now there's a new way to do it. I guess it's not that new. It's actually been a while that it's been happening, but the technology for this service is improving. I'm talking about vertical farming, which is very popular in urban areas. And it's fascinating how much lettuce, for example, they can grow in such a small space. I decided to take a closer look at vertical farming and the tech behind it. Hi, everyone. I'm Bonnie Schneider with your Ecotech Analyst Insights. The future of farming is indoors and upward. Vertical farms powered by AI and robotics are stacking crops in LED-lit layers from floor to ceiling in urban warehouses. Smart sensors and AI algorithms continuously optimize temperature, humidity, and nutrient levels, while automated robots handle everything from seeding to harvesting. The result? A single facility can now produce the equivalent of 400 acres of conventional farming in just 1 acre of vertical space. 2 key growing technologies dominate this space: hydroponics, where plants grow in nutrient-rich water solutions, and aeroponics, where roots suspend in air, receiving nutrients through a fine mist. These soilless systems enable precise control over nutrient delivery while reducing water usage by up to 95%. Plus, they can enjoy perfect growing conditions regardless of the weather outside. Vertical farming does face challenges, including energy costs and crop limitations. Plus, the initial investment for vertical farms can be substantial. Where can you find vertical farms?
Cities like Singapore, Dubai, Shanghai, New York City, and Tokyo are currently leading the way in vertical farming. By producing fresh food year-round within city limits, vertical farming offers a new model of agriculture, using less water, no pesticides, and minimal transportation. An appealing solution for expanding urban areas.
Now, you may not be aware, but more than half the world lives in cities globally, and that number is expected to increase in the decades to come. So, solutions like vertical farming that are leaning into tech and creating more sustainable food and sustainable agriculture are very exciting. In the way that they could hopefully supply more organic food, not using pesticides, and also reducing water use. Or these vertical farms that I just spoke about use 90% less water than large farms do. So I think it's a promising technology for sustainable agriculture. And I'd be curious to see what the panel thinks.
So I got to tell you, 3 times now I've almost bought this thing. I think it's called Garden with a Y in it, where it's like it looks like PVC pipe. Have you guys seen this? Looks like PVC pipes, and they have little outs things, and you could put in different plugs for different vegetables or flowers and have a mixed use thing. And in a little corner of your room, you can create this like beautiful thing that both feeds you, makes it smell nice, and is pretty to look at. Um, I don't doubt it, and it uses a little bit of hydroponics and stuff, and there's some, some tech to it as well and lighting, but, um, I just don't know at scale, right? Because so much today of our food is so processed and done at scale, right? Could this make a meaningful dent in big ag, right? And I'm all for it if it does, obviously.
Well, they're
So
doing this here in
one,
Ohio, and we're excited about it here. I just want to throw that out there. I think it can be great for a lot of produce that we eat, especially things like microgreens and salads and so on. It seems to work very, very well for that. There's an organization or a company in Akron called Vigio that's gotten a lot of press for doing this in old industrial building in downtown Akron. There's another one out in Medina that makes that is a real large scale producer of vertically farmed salads, and we buy them all the time. They're tremendous. They don't need pesticides because there's no pests. It's a really positive move, and I think that it can make an impact. It's just not for all types of vegetables, and I think that that's one of the challenges here is you can't grow some things vertically.
That's true.
yeah. So what is the level of scale that we can get to with this? Because ultimately, does this wind up being the digital equivalent of the neighborhood garden project, or is this kind of like something we can feed an entire city using?
I think it can be scaled within the cities. So when we're looking at local areas that need to grow food, it's possible. Now, there is the downside of the cost setup that they can be expensive because you're talking about having the IoT and temperature sensors, and that equipment can get pricey. So it's not something that can be scaled cheaply, but it can be scaled. And cities, as I mentioned in my report, like Singapore, for example, are leaning into this in an important way. And the conversation about food and big ag is definitely coming to the forefront. People are looking for less processed foods and having not just a locals farmers market, but even more local. In the cities, when you live like in New York, for example, you'll have in Union Square, a farmers market where they're driving a couple hours around the city. And it's very exciting because you're getting that local produce. But imagine if you're getting your lettuce that's a half a block away. I mean, that's pretty exciting. So I think it is going to be scaled. It's going to take a while, and it's going to take some more cost. And then the argument will be, okay, does the cost worth it to have pesticide-free lettuce or basil or some of the
Well,
things they grow there?
is it a question that it's much more expensive to do it that way?
It can be with the setup, especially if we're talking about scaling it to the level of that with the technology. But more and more cities are doing this and having success with it.
I mean, I like the idea of, the family farming. You grow your own food, even if it's just for your family. It doesn't take a lot to just grow enough for your family, right? And what a kind of game changer that would be.
I think the
I would-
AI
I would-
technology will also help it speed up and where we've seen it maybe 10 years ago versus now.
I would like to see the math on that because, all the people are saying that it's less expensive to go use some giant field somewhere and ship it. Are we really factoring in the total cost of that? Because, when I look at it, I'm like, the cost of moving all that stuff and the produce and the trucks and the impact it has on the climate is, not insignificant.
Well, I just heard about a startup using reinforced growing techniques.
Uh-huh.
That,
And
you
for-
know,
and-
that may
and-
revolutionize this.
And,
Maybe
and for all you people who are only watching the C block, go see the A block so you know what he's talking about.
exactly.
Well,
But
the
hey,
nice thing about farming on a field is that it has this magical source of light that comes from the sky for about half
Yeah,
the
that's true.
day. The trouble with vertical farming is that indoor farming requires artificial lighting, and artificial lighting can actually be a big power draw. And if you're using fossil fuels to generate the power for the artificial lighting, then maybe it's not so efficient. And the same thing is true of some of the other aspects of it,
But-
moving around big pallets of soil with plants and so on with a forklift. If you're using a fossil fuel powered forklift to do that, that's not as great as using maybe an electric one. There's all sorts of aspects to it that do make it less suitable. But if you look at things, so for example, I mentioned, if you go to buckeyefresh.com, for example, you can see the scale already of some of these vertical farming techniques. And you can buy this basically everywhere in the state. I think most other states have similar producers as well. And they are able to produce this stuff cost effectively and competitively with farms.
Hey, we've been doing this, artificial lights and plants growing since heck I was in college, man. We had all kinds of plants in the
remind me to
closet.
tell you that story one time. I got in a lot of trouble for that.
My house has artificial lights too. I just thought about that. I think yours might as well have electrically powered lights instead of using the sun.
Yeah, it's like one resource for another. You get the free sun, outside, but then you have to use all the water. So it depends on how you look.
Let me just say there's some crazy guy in Ohio I know always is on here talking about how alternative energy is getting cheaper and cheaper every day. So there you go. We need to wrap up, though, this edition of Techstrong Gang. It's been a deep sea kind of day. I hope you've enjoyed it. We'll be talking more about this stuff, I'm sure, in the days and weeks ahead. Salagna, Stephen, Bonnie, Mike, thank you for joining. Thank you for watching. As usual, we've got a full Techstrong TV lineup coming at you. Stephen mentioned earlier, we've got AI Tech Field Day. Is it Wednesday, Thursday, Stephen, or Tuesday, Wednesday? I'm confused.
It is Wednesday, Thursday. We'll be live streaming on Techstrong, including, of course, Techstrong AI. We'll have some familiar faces from the gang there, including, of course, John Swartz and Mish Ashley, but also John Willis is going to be out there. And we'll be recording, in addition to doing the Tech Field Day, the AI-focused Tech Field Day presentations, we're going to be doing the gang. We're going to be recording the gang live on site in San Jose. So watch on Thursday and Friday for the Techstrong Gang episodes recorded live with me.
Fantastic. All righty. Hey, that's a wrap. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of Techstrong TV. Stay tuned. This is a breaking news kind of situation. We'll be covering it as best we can. But until then, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong Gang. Have a great day, everyone. We're out.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. We're here on Techstrong TV again. I'm really happy to have my next guest on. I know him for, I don't want to say forever, but I know Jim a long time. And he's done some really good work for the community, for the DevOps world. He's my friend Jim Schild. Jim is founder and head of community at North American DevOps Group, which many of us just call NADOG. But hey, Jim, how are you, man? It's great to have you on here. I can't believe you've never been on Techstrong TV before.
I know. We've talked so many times. I mean, I think you and I have like a quarterly call and just catch up and stuff.
Yeah.
And we always talk about doing stuff together. I think this is the first official time. I don't think I've had you at any
Yeah.
NADOG events yet either.
No, I know Mitchell was recently one you did, I think, out in Denver.
Yeah.
Mitchell Ashley from our team was there. But looking at all those instruments back there, you and Mitchell could have jammed up. You know, he's the guitar man, and you look like the
Yeah.
keyboard dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
We
I
talked a
see a
little
few
bit
guitars too.
about that. Yeah. Yeah. I'm no good at any of it, but it's fun. It's my my passion to
Good for
try
you.
at least.
You know what? I bang around with a guitar too once in a while. Not anything to speak of, just enough to make my fingers good and calloused. You know.
Yeah. Exactly.
Anyways, Jim, we're going to talk about NADOG, but before we get into that, I wanted to give the viewers a little bit of a sense of who Jim Schild is beyond founder of North American DevOps Group. You've had, you've been around the block once, maybe one and a half times. Let's talk a little bit about kind of your career path, your career arc, your life journey.
Yeah, I won't go too far back, but I wanted to be a teacher. That's why I went to school. I majored in English literature, but when I got out of school, I started working in tech, and then immediately was making more money than I ever would as a teacher. So and then we started having kids, so never turned back. But
That's a common story, right, man? Back then,
yeah,
because back then, Jim, you didn't have all of the technical majors in college that you have today, right? There was no cybersecurity kind of classes. There wasn't, I mean, you may have had some computer science programming on punch card. I don't want to say we're old, but we're old. You might have had punch card kind of stuff and all of that, but not like what these kids have today. I don't want to sound like that guy, but not like what's available today.
No, yeah. I just missed the punch cards, but I was around for the fax machines and floppy disks. That was where I started my career for sure. I remember like when zip disks came out, that was a huge deal because they were a full megabyte or 10 or something right on each one of those. But yeah, it's I actually started to dip my toes into the DevOps world. Gosh, what year was this? 2003. There was a company called BuildForge. Do you remember BuildForge?
Sure. Yes, I do.
They're like the Jenkins before Jenkins, right? They were the enterprise type of solution. Wasn't open source or anything. They were acquired by IBM. So Joe Center and Tim Wall started that company, and I joined them, and never turned back. I've been in the DevOps space ever since then. I mean, it wasn't even called DevOps then. There was no term for it, but that's really what we were doing, trying to figure out how to bring everything together and break down those walls between ops and dev.
Absolutely. And then, Jim, let's fast forward to, Patrick Dubois coins the term DevOps. And certainly by 2012, 2011, there are people talking about DevOps Days is happening. That becomes sort of the community event, right? It's that kind of unconference kind of mold, model where, it's not, you're basically the commercial kind of thing. And then, certainly I launched we published DevOps.com for the first time in March of 2014, though we started in 2013. But at the time, at some point, I guess you're over at CloudBees around then, right? Or was that before CloudBees?
Yeah, I joined CloudBees in 16 or 17. And so I'd already started NADOG. I started NADOG in 2015 when I was working at...
I know it was around when DevOps.com, but what I remember.
Yeah, it would all kind of happen at the same time, right? All of us. In fact, I remember speaking with Derek Weeks and Mark Miller too about All Day DevOps, and they started about the same time. I forget who else I just saw was celebrating their 10th anniversary in the space. But anyway, we all just kind of were doing the same thing in different cities and then found each other later on.
Absolutely. So give me the genesis story for NADOG, if you will. On the first day,
Yeah, I was working at CA, and just I was actually in sales at the time, selling all of their DevOps related tools, and CA had a great
They
field
had
marketing
bought a
team, and
bunch.
yeah, they were really a good company. This was pre Broadcom, in
Mhm.
2015. And a peer of mine, a guy named John Ingstrom, he was doing just like networking events, like a monthly networking event in Denver. Um, uh, and was really a community led initiative. I don't think any of us knew what that was at the time. But I kind of adopted that from him and turned it into what NADOG is today. And really the idea was, it's great to go to all these big conferences and to get leads from your website and all that stuff, but you really don't have relationships with these people that you're trying to start a sales cycle with. So now you're trying to build trust with them as you're trying to sell to them. So the idea was, why don't I try to build the relationships with people in the front and just contribute to the community, be active in the community, and then everything else will come later. And I use kind of the analogy now too of like, if you move into a new neighborhood and a neighbor comes, knocks on your door and invites you to a barbecue at his house, you go over to the barbecue, and then the next month he invites you again. You're going over there every month to go to barbecues, and then you find out this guy who's inviting you is a plumber. Um, he's not trying to. He didn't knock on your door trying to sell you his plumbing service, right? He's offering you something to the community. He's being part of the community. You find out what he's doing, and now naturally you're probably going to want to use that guy if you've got any plumbing issues. And so that's really, a simple way to describe what a community-led initiative is. Get out there, deliver value. Don't worry about all the other stuff. It's going to come.
Yeah, I love that attitude, Jim. That's beautiful, man. So, 10 years ago, this is, give us if you, and now here you are celebrating 10th anniversary, right? Let's talk about the growth, if you will, right? The path. Because look, we're, as you mentioned, all this starts happening 10, 12 years ago. And, for many of us, COVID was just game changer for good or bad. It was a game changer, right? It
Yeah.
changed the way we're doing things. And certainly was for NADOG, right? When you're doing community events and all of a sudden you can't meet in person, right? We got to explore virtual and,
Yeah.
talk to us about this journey before COVID, through COVID, out the other end of COVID.
Yeah, so NADOG had already turned into a business. It was like my side business, through sponsorships. Pretty much everybody in the industry has been an NADOG sponsor at some point. But it grew to the point to where I was ready to leave my role at Clabby's. And Clabby's, by the way, just a shout out to them. They were so awesome. They're a very community focused company, and they really supported the growth of NADOG and it put me to a position where I could just run it as my full-time job. So this was late 2019. So I left CloudBees, and then immediately the world shuts down. I'm like, oh shoot, I just left my role at CloudBees to run an events company, and we can't do events anymore. So yeah, we were on Zoom for 2 years, which was, thank God Zoom was there, because I don't know how we would have done this in 2015.
Well,
even,
not just you guys. Thank God Zoom would, how any of us would have communicated if
Yeah.
not, we had everything from Zoom weddings to Zoom funerals, right? To Zoom
Yeah, birthday
conferences.
parties. We celebrated my 50th over Zoom.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But yeah, at least it was there. So we got to keep the community going, and then we restarted in-person events again in 2022. But our growth has really all been grassroots, word of mouth. We've never spent a dime on advertising. It's really just who you know. Like, I reached out to my initial network for the first event that we did in Irvine back in April of 2015. And 7 or 8 people showed up. A few of those are still active NADOG members today. But and it just spawned from that, and we just kept doing it. It's all about repetition too, as you know. Like, any of these kinds of things, when it comes to community, they're very, very fragile. If you're not paying attention to them, if you're not continuing to feed them and grow them and deliver value and have activity and events, they die very, very quickly. I mean, it requires people to really continue to nurture them. So I think I thought naively when I started NADOG, like, oh, it'll grow to the point to where it's all just kind of automatic and I can just sit back and just put out events and attend and people will be there. No, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of elbow grease, and just consistency. But the other part of it too is just you have to respect the community for what it is. Don't go into a community-led initiative thinking you're going to sell to people, because you'll scare them away and your numbers will shrink immediately. You got to just get in there. Be genuine, be sincere, deliver value, find out, because we run communities now in every major city in North America. And every one of them is a little bit different. The kinds of things that they want to talk about in San Diego are going to be a bit different than what they want to talk about in Boston. So it's listening to the community and continuing to talk to them and making sure that you apply that to the events and activities that we're doing. So it's a constant, gardening of the community, which has been by far the most rewarding thing I've ever done. I've met so many people. I mean, people like you. I mean, I could go down a list and never stop of all the great people that I've met in this space. And it's been a wonder for my career. Not only did it help me early on when I was using it as a community-led initiative, as a seller at CA, but even now when that's my full-time job, I'm actually running the events and community at a company called Duplo Cloud now, which is a DevOps automation and cloud operations automation platform. And I get to apply all the things that I've learned at NADOG right into my role over at Duplo Cloud too.
I want to come back and talk about upcoming NADOG events, but Jim, I want to turn for a moment and talk about kind of the state of DevOps. Right?
Yeah.
The DevOps market that we see today is not the DevOps market of 2012, 2015, or 2019 even, right? You've got, platform engineering and cloud native and GitOps and, the DevOps vendors have turned into DevSecOps platform vendors, and and none of it is unnatural. This is the natural, it's evolution,
Sure.
right? Stuff happens.
Yeah.
But there are people who say, well, DevOps isn't what it was. It's not as important. It's kind of sunk into the woodwork, which is what good technology frameworks do. They become part of the foundation that we work in. How's that? Like, what do you see, sitting in putting on your NADOG cap now, not Duplo, because
Sure.
you sell to those people, but as the NADOG head, how do you see the DevOps community today and where's it going?
It's honestly, and I'm sure you see this too, it's a constant struggle with the definition of DevOps and what it is. And because all those things you talked about, platform engineering and AI, by the way, every company is an AI company now, right? Just
Absolutely.
like everybody was a cloud company, then everybody was a DevOps company, and now there was an AI company. And so I think marketing teams, and I fall into that category, are all to blame for that too, and kind of twisting that into what it is, or even like using DevOps as a title. I'm a DevOps engineer. But what does that mean, right? Somebody told me at one of the events, you ask 10 people to define DevOps, you're going to get 11 or 12 different responses. So, and that's absolutely true. So I think we spend a lot of time in our community trying to reiterate what DevOps really is. Because I think we struggled a little bit last year, the year before. We toyed with kind of removing DevOps from the name of the group, because I think a lot of people look at that and they think, oh, that's release automation. That's really what they pigeonhole DevOps into. It's just automating my releases and into production. That's part of it, but that's only a tiny part of it. And so I think re-educating, I really want to reclaim the definition of DevOps and get everyone to embrace that and not use it as a marketing term. It really should just be something that we're all doing. I've talked to developers before about events that we're doing, and they've told me like, yeah, I'm not in DevOps, so it doesn't apply to me. Like, no, you are in DevOps. We all are. Like everybody from the developer to the business owners on the other end, right? It's all part of that. If you read the Phoenix Project, and that's really is just a longer definition of what DevOps is. He's not just talking to the people who are releasing the code. He's talking to everybody involved, all of the stakeholders. Everybody needs to know what everyone's doing. And if you're developing code, you should know what the value of what you're developing is going to deliver to the company and to the business owners.
I've had this discussion with Patrick Dubois, John Willis, Damon Edwards, some of the people who really kind of planted the flag. I mean, Patrick came up with the name DevOps, right?
Right.
It was on purpose that they didn't have a real definition, like Agile had a manifesto and platform engineering. You go to platformengineering.org, and we run a site, platformengineering.com. We partner with platformengineering.com. They're very specific because they believe silos, they say silos are good. You need to communicate across silos, but silos are good. I think, the best thing is if you listen to like Andrew Clay Schaefer, he says the DevOps you get is the DevOps you deserve, right? Because at the end of the day, you decide what DevOps is to you. If it's only release automation, God bless you, go for it.
Right.
If it is an umbrella, which I believe it is, an umbrella term that frankly platform engineering is part of and development is part of and CI/CD. So it's about, to me, DevOps encapsulates this software factory that we have built today, which is how software is made. This is how software gets made today. I think before DevOps became, the standard, software was made much like, not ancient, but 1800 era German guild craftsmen or Swiss watchmakers or, any of the old
We're
European
early auto manufacturers, right?
or early auto, right before the assembly line. It was a bespoke way of that we created software by, with these guild, craftsmen, highly skilled craftsmen.
Yeah.
And then just like Henry Ford bought the factory, the assembly line to car manufacturers, today's software is made on a supply chain, the software supply chain. We're all worried about the security of that software supply chain. But that software supply chain is the modern software factory. And DevOps, to me, describes the modern software factory and all the aspects of it, whether it's the platform that the developers work on or that CI/CD pipeline that we're putting in there, or the automated deployment and all of the testing and the DevSecOps and all of it. It all takes place in this factory that we call DevOps.
Right.
That's my humble opinion on it.
Yeah,
I'm not
I think
humble.
that's a good. Never.
Never humble, but go ahead.
No, I think that's a great way to put it. I like telling people too that it doesn't matter what you call it, but I love the CALMR or COMS, whichever one you use, acronym, right? As long as you're focused on culture, automation, lean, and measurement, and then either S for sharing, and I think Scaled Agile got rid of that, and now it's R for recovery. So,
right.
Focusing on things that are important, right? Making sure your teams are communicating. Make sure you have a culture of motivating your people to deliver value to your product and to your organization. Making sure that you're spending wisely and that you're as efficient as possible, and you can automate where you can automate. You don't have to automate everything. Maybe it's not even suited for automation, but thinking about all of those things and making sure that you're doing everything you can to continually revisit those things and make sure that things aren't falling through the cracks. And I really think that's the way I think about DevOps. Just we're all trying to achieve the same goal, and what's the best way for us to do it?
I love it. Jim, we only got a few minutes left. Give us where are some Nate Dogg events happening over the next, 60, 90 days?
Well, we've got a packed schedule this year. I don't have the calendar right up in front of me, but we're starting our event. What month are we in right now? January,
It's
February,
January still. Yeah, yeah.
still
Let's say
January.
it's January 25th, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. So we're kicking off our events this year next month. I think we're starting in Irvine, and then to San Diego, and then to Phoenix. But if you go to nadog.com, we've got our full event schedule there. Anybody can come to our events as long as they're an IT practitioner or an IT leader. If you're a vendor, recruiter, salesperson, anything like that, then just talk to us about being a sponsor. But it's free to be a member, and we really
What about
focus.
marketing people, Jim?
Marketing people, same thing. Yeah, they would attend as a sponsor. And the reason that we do that is because we want this to be purely a DevOps community where the actual practitioners and leaders can learn from each other, and they can build their peer network. They know that they look to the left and right. It's their peers in the room and people who are facing the same challenges that they are on a daily basis. And so they can share with each other, oh, this is how I solved it, or how did you do this? We have our members generally volunteer to speak at our events as well, either as a featured speaker or in a panel or whatever format that particular community is looking for. We focus a lot on that sharing piece of it. So about half of our event times are reserved for networking and socializing and sharing with each other.
Hey, I got a selfish question for you.
Sure.
What about down here in South Florida? I don't know if I've seen a NADOG meetup event in South Florida.
We haven't. And you know what? Our first one was supposed to be in 2020. 2020 was like our big growth year. We had so many plans. We were going to do Miami. We were going to do, actually, we used to have European groups as well. So we were going to expand in Europe. But yeah, we haven't done one in Miami yet, but we would love to. Yeah, so we're looking at that. I'm doing another community event in Miami with Duplo Cloud. So hopefully that one will go well next month. And it really, for us, it just comes down to where we get sponsors, right? If I have sponsors that want to do events in Miami, then we'll go look and see what we can do if we can put together a community down there. But yeah, I know that's a growing space in Southern Florida. And
Miami, Lauderdale, West Palm, the whole South Florida. So the three counties, Palm Beach County, Broward County, Miami-Dade County. I think the three of them together, I forgot if it's the 15th biggest, 12th biggest, 7th biggest. It's one of the biggest metropolitan areas now in the country.
I think anything like in the top 12 too, that's not in the top 3. So if it's not New York or the Bay Area or even Texas, that's where we get the biggest turnouts. Like, and if we do an event in New York, you're guaranteed there are 3 or 4 other DevOps related or DevOps adjacent things going on. So there's this constant competition. But if I do something in San Diego, we're almost always the only game in town that night, right? Or even that week. So like, yeah, I think doing something in Miami, we probably would get a good turnout because we'd have everybody's attention.
Yeah, it's happening from a tech scene too. And it is, it's the whole Tri-County area because Miami could be funny, right? Like, we'll talk offline about it, but we'll talk. Jim, did we mention the website?
Yeah, nadog.com, NADOG. That's got a bunch of info. If you're a sponsor, reach out. We can send a prospectus as well. And yeah, all of our events are listed there. And yeah, we're really excited to get out and see everybody again this year. It was so awesome to get back out and see everybody without a piece of glass in front of us in 2022. And so yeah, I think the one positive thing I'll say about COVID is it really made us appreciate the time that we can spend face to face. And so we're taking advantage of every minute.
And as recent events show us, you never know what's going to happen or what disaster or calamity or thing's going to happen. So cherish times when you can get face to face with your peers, your friends, coworkers, and family. Jim, congratulations on 10 fine years at NADOG, and thank you for all you've been doing for the DevOps community. You and I will be in touch, but thanks again, and thanks for being on Techstrong TV, man. I appreciate it.
Of course, Alan, thank you so much. Thanks for your friendship over the years and your mentorship and everything. You've been so supportive and great to our community, and I really appreciate it.
We appreciate you. Jim Schild, founder and head of community at North American DevOps Group, NADOG, also with Duplo Cloud. Check them out. They're coming to Miami too. You're probably not in Miami out there, so it makes no difference to you, but do check out NADOG. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be back in a bit.
Hello, and welcome to the AI Leadership Insight series. I'm Amanda Rosani, and with me today is Ken Gramley. He is the CEO of Stamus Networks. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Amanda. Thank you very much for having me today.
Happy to have you on the show. And so can you share a little bit about the company and what services do you provide?
Stamus Networks is a network security company. We have been providing network detection and response products. We are a leader in, I would say, that area. In our roots are growing out of an intrusion detection system past, and then building that system into network detection and response. We are more heavily into Europe from our customer base than the U.S. We are entering the U.S. market right now, I would say, but we have central banks as customers in Europe, EU, governmental institutions, other governmental agencies. We're pretty big in financial institutions, a little bit in manufacturing as well, and very happy to be able to help our clients out.
Wonderful. Well, our topic of the day is cybersecurity algorithm transparency and explainable AI. And I want to start out by saying, or having you explain, please, what is the black box problem as it relates to cybersecurity? Can you explain that?
Sure. So the black box issue has to do with how well vendors explain what and why they have detected something. It's one thing to find out that, okay, I have this particular IP address and it has a problem. Often what happens is a tool will tell you that there's a problem there, but then it is left up to the incident responder to try and figure out what happened and why there is a problem. And if the tool would tell you exactly why it detected it and what it found about the detection and why it's saying you need to go investigate this, that would save those incident responders time. And obviously time saved is a good thing. So the challenge is duplication of effort, because the vendor who provided that knows what it is. Often they say, oh, no, I can't tell you how we detected it because that's our secret sauce. And so any vendor who's willing, I believe vendors should be willing to basically be much more transparent in how that detection is done, because it saves their customer time in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Having to spend all that time trying to figure it out when they could just go straight to it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now we're going to talk about the introduction of AI. And now as we're seeing AI integrated into everything, this causes more things to think about, more issues and concerns. What are a few of those?
Well, I think AI exacerbates the problem, because it is even harder with an AI algorithm to explain it to a customer and to explain why it found something wrong. One way to look at it is AI is really good at finding outliers, and AI algorithms themselves tend to put out okay, this is, a 0 to 1 scale. How do you then backtrack that into, okay, this is the reason for that output? And it also gives vendors the ability to just say, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Customer, just trust us. This is bad. Trust us. It's bad. Now go look. And, AI does a good, I would say, improves the problem of noise that security has generated since its beginning, but it doesn't solve the problem of noise. It just provides a different type of noise because every outlier out there is not necessarily evil. And transparency in those AI algorithms would also help the incident responders be able to save time and understand what is going on.
So, what tips do you have for business leaders as far as putting more transparency there and approaching and leveraging the benefits of AI while being more transparent?
Well, I would say, look to your vendors to both tell you why they come up with the problem that they came up with, what evidence they use, and then provide that evidence along with the issue so that you don't have to go searching for it yourself. Things should be packaged up together where you provide, here is the incident, here is the timeline of the incident, here are all of the components that happen, here are the PCAPs that go along with it. The more you can bundle all of that together for your customer, the easier the incident response effort is for them.
Do you foresee there being, if this continues to be a problem where there's this back and forth with a vendor and it's a lot more effort, do you think the companies themselves will start creating their own tools so that they can just leave the vendor out?
Well, I think the companies have always have a build buy decision they need to make. And often it's some combination thereof, where they will do some of their own algorithms on top of their SIM or whatever other tools they have, but they have always at the same time needed some level of tools from vendors because there are pieces of it that are very hard to build yourself. And then even once you have built a tool, you have to then maintain that tool. You have to worry about keeping the right skill sets on board. And if you're a hospital system, do you really want to have software? How many software engineers do you want on your staff to be able to keep your tool set up and running? So that's a challenge to the build it yourself. But I certainly understand when customers have done that because of the frustration that they have had with the vendors that they've used.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right, though. Then, some company that's really not a technology company at all is now becoming one, just to try to have their own tools. That'd be difficult.
Right.
So as AI advances so rapidly, what do you foresee in the future as far as it relates to cybersecurity?
Well, I think there's been a lot of talk recently about the autonomous SOC and the idea of aggregating all data into one place and then putting AI on that data at a data lake level. Traditional SIMs have kind of attempted that. I think haven't done a very good job of it, which is why there are some next generation people out that are attempting to do it. And while I'm not sure that we will ever get to an autonomous SOC like we will get to an autonomous car, for instance, a shout out to SentinelOne on that comparison. I don't know if you've seen that video, but it's a very good comparison between stages of an autonomous SOC and stages of driving. I don't know that we'll ever get to the point where a SOC will truly be autonomous, but the more we can do to remove the drudgery and the low-level work from SOC engineers so that they can focus their effort on higher-level issues, the better off all of the industry will be. So I see that as the goal that vendors are trying to help their customers get to, and at the same time, having the AI applied at that higher level where you can see all of the data. The challenge that you have with putting AI on point tools, whether it's network or endpoint or email, it doesn't matter, is those tools only see part of that data, right? So AI on an end tool on an endpoint protection tool, for instance, is a great thing, but it doesn't have the ability to aggregate what's going in on the network, which is ground truth. Same thing with network. We can put AI on our product and we have machine learning algorithms to do certain things, but we don't see what's going on the endpoint, and we don't see, what what processes are being created by which executables, which an endpoint tool can see. So applying that AI at the data lake level makes a lot of sense because AI is good at searching through huge amounts of data that the typical individual person can't do. That's its strength. And so having it at that higher level makes a lot of sense, which means having a set of tools that can feed into a data lake or something where that AI is then applied, such as what SentinelOne is trying to do with Purple AI, I think is a great future path for our industry.
A huge time saver and potentially more accurate as well.
Exactly.
And what was that video again? Share that again.
Sentinel. If you search on the SentinelOne video for their autonomous SOC, there's a sales engineer who did a great job comparing the autonomous SOC to autonomous driving and the different stages of that and where they believe they are in the autonomous SOC stage, but also in how that kind of maps to people's understanding of autonomous driving. And so I think it's good for people who aren't heavily into the industry as a good takeaway to, on a big picture, understand it.
Awesome. I'll have to go look for that.
Yeah.
Well, if there was one key takeaway you could share with our audience today, what would that be?
Well, I think it's to make sure that the vendors that you're using are providing clarity in the detections that they have on why they detected what they detect and are providing the evidence to go along with it. And, we at Stammis try very hard to do that. We have always been known. And one of the things that our customers really like us for is the clarity in the data that we provide and the amount of, first off, the amount of data that we provide along with the detection. And the fact that they're not dependent on other tools to do correlations after the fact. We correlate everything right up front when we provide it to you. So I think the more that vendors can provide that level of transparency, whether it's on their AI detection or their traditional detection, I think the better off the industry will be.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights today.
Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate the time.
And thank you to our audience. Stay tuned. There's more.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Platform Engineering Show. I'm your co-host, Alan Schimmel, CEO of Techstrong and PlatformEngineering.com. And let me introduce you to my co-host, Luca Galente, who's head of PlatformEngineering.org. So we got all the platform engineerings here for you. What's up, Luca? How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. I see you're still in Morocco, enjoying that Mediterranean lifestyle. Good for you, man.
Yes. Goal is to show up at the Christmas dinner tent, and make everyone else jealous.
All right. Well, you should be. Well, I would tell you could come here and get tan, but our weather has been so miserable. I forgot what the sun looks like. We've just had
in Florida?
rain and cloud. Yeah, it's been very rainy, very cloudy. It's supposed to go down into the 50s this weekend, which is pretty cold for here. Yeah, people are freaking out, busting out their coats.
You're like,
It's
oh, I don't
nuts.
have the.
Oh my God, it's so cold. They're running to the stores, stocking up on water. It's crazy. Anyway, man, welcome. This is episode 2 of the Platform Engineering Show. If you missed the first one, it's available. It's available on Techstrong TV or YouTube or any of your favorite platforms of podcast platforms. I got platform on the brain. But any of your favorite podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. In today's episode, Luca, what are we discussing?
So we're talking about the salary gap between platform engineers and DevOps engineers, where how real that is, where that might come from, and what that might mean for where we're going as a space.
Absolutely. So I told you when we were talking off camera, I have some interesting views here.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that platform engineers are making more money than DevOps engineers. You know,
I think you saw this happen
first,
already once, right?
Yeah, well, but here's the deal. When I first started DevOps.com in 2014, there was a huge fight in the community, like people like Patrick Dubois and John Willis and, some of the early, Adam Clay Schaefer, some of the early people in DevOps who said there is no such thing as a DevOps engineer. That's a fallacy. But in spite of that, the markets kind of decided there was such a thing as a DevOps engineer. Right. And it's funny, Luca, when I first started, to be a DevOps engineer, you had to know Chef, Puppet, or Ansible.
Right.
Maybe a little Jenkins. That's what a DevOps engineer. That was it. And so did that define a DevOps engineer? Or did that define what DevOps teams do? No. But yet, it became one of the most popular jobs out there.
And where were most people coming from into the DevOps engineers ranks? We're like,
ops. They were
just
the ops people.
Just the ops people, right?
Yeah,
just rebranding to DevOps.
Yeah, back then, and the DevOps was a different world back then. Back then, the devs used to say, you know why I don't like DevOps? Too much ops. It's too ops-centric. And you talk to the ops people and they say, you know why I don't like DevOps? Too dev-centric. Too much dev. And so sometimes that's the test of a good compromise when each side thinks the other side got a better deal.
Complaining, yeah.
But I'll be honest, I went to both sides of this argument, and I came to the conclusion that no, there is no such thing as a DevOps engineer. That's a unicorn, a mythical creature. That really there are DevOps teams that are cross-functional, that have security engineers and testing engineers and developers and, SREs and all of that stuff. So I think the jig's up. I think the market has come to the realization that what exactly is a DevOps engineer and why should we pay them? Now, I know a lot about DevOps engineers. I don't know a lot about platform engineers, though. So tell me why they're real and why you think that's got legs.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about in the first episode last week, right, about this, the difference between platform engineers, DevOps engineers, this like product mindset, and how platform engineering evolved from DevOps, right? And I think that's really the key lens here to look at this as well, right? Because the way I think about it is this, what we were discussing is platform engineering is like this, industrialization, right, of how you basically build and deliver software. And this like DevOps approach works in smaller teams, in smaller settings, simpler tool chains, but it doesn't scale really well to like large enterprise, lots of people. And so once you get to that scale, then that's the key thing, right? It's really about recognizing, well, we do need separations of concerns. Like that's a good thing. We had Kelsey Hightower at PlatformCon 24 this year, and he did this like fireside chat with us. And he was saying, if you tell people silos are good, it's a really quick way to get a lot of people in our industry really mad, right? And it shouldn't be, right? That shouldn't be the case, because silos are good. As long as you have the right, the right ways of communicating between things, right? And I think that was a very interesting insight for me last week from the conversation, right? Of how you framed it. From like this historical perspective, DevOps is kind of like this like revolutionary swing towards like, hey, everybody needs to do everything and so on. And I think that's really like the frame of this conversation for me is like platform engineering is kind of like bringing back a little bit of, silos, not to the extent where like, hey, we just throw over the fence the code and like we don't care about it. But you need some level of separation of concerns to be a productive engineer organization at a certain scale, right? If you're 10 people, great. Everybody knows everything. You can do DevOps. Fantastic. If you are, 2,000 people, you just can't take the same approach.
Right.
Yeah, 10,000. And so that's really the thing. And then I think, to your point, what we're seeing is, and so I do think that the platform engineer role is more legitimate, if you will. And I hope people are not going to clip this than the DevOps engineer role, right? Because ultimately, to your point, like DevOps is a methodology, is a practice, is something that we do as a team. It shouldn't have been a role, right? That's just because the market evolved that way. Whereas platform engineer is a very specific role, and I think it's actually very important to define it precisely. Because one risk is that a very similar thing happens again, which is like, okay, now the DevOps engineers rebrand to platform engineers and they don't change anything, right? And they approach building a platform the same way they're used to, building and managing infrastructure, which is a one and done 6 months infrastructure project. That's not how you are supposed to build a platform. The platform is a, something that is a product. It has a life cycle of 5+ years in most enterprises. And so that's really how you should approach it as a product. And so that's one of the key differences between DevOps and platform engineers is this like product approach, product mindset. And so that means that you have a very differentiated role from, for example, I&O teams, right? Like infrastructure and operations teams, like you still need them, right? You need both. And then of course, in some companies, platform engineering becomes this, like I was just talking to like a large financial institution half an hour ago, where like platform engineering is like this huge umbrella term that has I&O teams, that has like cloud ops, that has SRE, that has everything underneath it. But whether, regardless of what your the end sort of like org structure looks like on your end, it's important that the platform team has its own sort of like mission and role, which is building a product, is not maintaining the infrastructure that product runs on, right? And so that's where, I&O teams are still necessary. That's where SREs are still necessary, right? It's not that like platform engineers replace any of these. It's more augment them and really bring that product perspective into the equation.
Yep. Few thoughts on that. First of all, I don't know if you're familiar. There's a show on Apple TV. It's in its 2nd season now. It's called Silo. Did you ever see this show or hear of it?
No, I haven't. No,
you should check it out. It's called Silo. So it's a sci-fi series, right? And the idea is something happened on Earth. The Earth is poisoned. Typical sci-fi stuff. The Earth is poison, toxic. And people live in a silo. Like there's a silo that goes way underground, and this like whole society lives within this silo, and the silo somehow filters the air, and it's 100 years or hundreds of years already, and people are just living in this silo. And then some woman did something wrong, and they exile her out of the silo to the wastelands. And she goes out there, and you know what she finds? Other silos. And so it turns out that there's all of these silos out there where humanity has survived, but they don't communicate
and they're not aware
with
of each other. That is funny.
Right.
Okay.
And so they don't, one silo is all dead because a catastrophe happened or something, a virus outbreak. Another silo is doing really well. Another silo, people are starving. where
Right.
had they had
You have all the different like
communication-
branches, right? Basically.
Right. Yeah. They're all like little petri dishes. But
Yeah,
had they had communication, the whole would have been better, right? Maybe they could have
Sorry.
reclaimed the earth or something by then. It's the same thing here, right? When you have
Mhm.
silos, it's okay if you're a platform engineer and you're doing your job, you're not a developer. You're a platform engineer, and a developer is a developer. It's the communication that's the key. And that was really the part about dev. Like if you speak to Patrick Dubois and some of those folks, it was about the communication. It wasn't about the title. It wasn't about being a DevOps engineer. It wasn't about knowing everything. It was about the communication, working together, right? In sort of harmony, if you will, to accomplish the common goal. You said something last week too that I thought was really dead on, which was we can't expect developers to be responsible for building their own platforms, right? Think about it. That's like saying, hey, you want to live in this house, go build the house, then you could live in the house. That might have worked like, in the American West in the 1800s or something.
If
or,
it's a very simple house, yeah. Like,
yeah, right. And if it's a log cabin. But that's not the way modern software works, right? You can't tell someone, go build their own house and then you can live in the house.
yeah, exactly.
People want to
and
buy
this
houses.
communication thing, I think, is super interesting, right? Because we spoke about this like product mindset as kind of like one of the key sort of differences between the, this like DAO's approach and like the platform approach. But and one thing that also always comes up is this also like communication thing, right? And I think it's very interesting. I think it speaks to the fact that like despite the original intentions, this communication focus was really lost in the DevOps world, right? Because now people are looking at platform engineering, and every time I say, one of the key skill sets of a platform engineer is communication, right? Why? Because you need to mediate between all the different, vested interests, basically, of all the different stakeholder groups. Like you need to make the developers happy. You need to make executives happy. You need to make the I&O teams, the security, the architects, everyone happy. You need to get everybody on board. And you need to be a really strong communicator to do that, because the way you speak to the value of the platform, to developers is completely different than when you do it to, executives. Like, developers are going to be about waiting times, and security teams is going to be like enforcing compliance automatically. Executives is going to be about time to market. If you talk to developers about time to market, they're not going to care, right? So, so that's why you need to be a really strong communicator. But I think what's very interesting, based on what you just said, is this, right? That like people are very like, every time I say this, people are like, yes, everybody just like nods and is like, wow, yeah, like, as if it's like a revolutionary concept, right? Like, except like it was the same thing in DAOs, to your point. It's just that it got lost.
Yeah, it got pushed to the side, with people wanting to hire DevOps engineers, frankly, right? Where the real DevOps people knew that a DevOps engineer was kind of a squishy thing at best. But let's talk about platform engineers, Europe versus North America for a second, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, the U.S. or North America, meaning Mexico, Canada as well. I mean, generally, it's a bigger market than, let's say, the EU market. But there's usually a little parity. I know in like software developers, you get big discrepancies, let's say, between Eastern Europe and Western Europe, Northern Europe, Southern Europe. We have it in the U.S. too. A platform engineer or a developer in the Bay Area in San Francisco makes a lot more than one, in Atlanta, let's say, right? Atlanta has relatively lower level. But is there a big discrepancy in salaries, but still between EU and North America for that?
Yeah. So we ran this survey across hundreds of platform teams and even more individual contributors, because we both asked DevOps and platform engineers, how much you make. and the numbers are considerably lower. I wish I could show the slide. Maybe we can show it later, but or link it
maybe
somewhere.
we could put a link to the. Well, what we should do is put a link to the whole report where people can download it.
So
we'll
State
have
of
that
Platform
in here.
Engineering Report, Volume 3, you can download it on platformengineering.org. But the what we've seen is there is a probably like a 30-40% gap between sort of like North America and Europe, both in platform engineer and DevOps. Yeah. And then so for example, consistent. So for example, the baseline for Europe on platform engineer is 120 grand, and it's about like 100 for DevOps. On platform engineer is almost 200 grand on platform engineers for North America, and for DevOps is 150 for in Europe, right? So platform engineers is higher on both, so about like 20-30% higher than DevOps engineers, and then North America is higher on both of those numbers. And this is, by the way, interesting. I don't know if you've seen, like, lately there's a lot of like on X, there's a lot of people like posting this this delta that developed between like Europe and the United States, because to your point, well, actually Europe is technically a bigger internal market, right? Because they have like, it's like 500 million consumers instead of like 300 something. But
130, yep.
Yeah, but if you look at like post GFC, right, the great financial crisis in 08, like they completely diverged. Like up until there, in the 90s and so on, we're kind of like Europe and US were like growing at a similar pace. US was always a little bit higher, but not that much. Since then, basically Europe flatlined, and then US has gone vertical in the last 10 to 15 years. So it's super interesting to see. And then people kind of like always, in these threads, like break it down in terms of like, even if you look at like really, like I think IT workers, software engineers, it's so much. It like the delta is huge, right? Like we're talking, I was just talking to like a really good product team actually in the platform engineering space in Portugal. They are pre-seed, probably like 2 million something that they raised, and they have like 15 engineers since like a year, right? Like this would be impossible to do in like New York, right?
You couldn't do it.
Like,
yeah.
No way. Yeah. No way. And so I think like, and so in some sense it's not a bad thing, right? Because from a startup cost perspective, it's easier, but broadly, definitely you can see there's like a big gap. And I mean, Europe is being smoked right now. We're really just being left behind.
Well, so I read this whole series of books by a guy named Thomas Friedman, who writes for the New York Times. The whole, like, I don't know if you ever heard The World is Flat is a book he wrote, and then he wrote, It's a Flat Hot World, and it's flat this and that. My thought is, especially when we're talking Western Europe, right? It's not the Stone Age there. They're as technologically advanced, I think, as most of the US. And that's what I'd love to see the numbers. Like, is it maybe that platform engineering is a relatively new discipline, and so most of the platform engineers are based like in the Bay Area or New York and Boston, where you got to make 200K just to live, right? 200K is not living high on the hog. The
geo
in New
bias,
York.
right? The geo distribution bias. Yeah, that's interesting.
Right. But what's a platform engineer in Dallas making, or Atlanta, or Charlotte, or Miami, or where cost of living is a little less than New York or Boston or San Francisco. And maybe there's just more platform engineers concentrated there because they're more tech savvy. They're more advanced technologically. You don't have, heck, I'm trying to get a social media person down here in South Florida who has B2B and tech industry experience, and I can't find one. I can't find one because they're not, well, I can find plenty of social media people. There's no tech. Yeah, I've got plenty of social media people applying who have done makeup companies, real estate companies, financial advisors, all kinds of crazy stuff like this, but not in the tech space because they're not here.
Right.
And supposedly Florida is getting very like Miami. They want to do Silicon Beach, and they're doing all these things.
Mm,
But we don't have that community that you have in New York or Boston or San
the
Francisco
DNA.
or Austin, right? And I wonder if that's not part of it. But the other thing from the flat Earth stuff is, look, if it's that much cheaper to go to Portugal and get a platform engineering team, and I'm a startup guy, and I say, okay, I need a platform engineering team. I could do it in Portugal for half the price.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it in Portugal for half the price. I got to be stupid not to, right?
Yeah.
It's the whole reason why India has an IT industry, because it was half the price or less,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
to get engineers.
And that's
there.
happening, right? Like if you look at like Eastern Europe, like there's a huge, and it's interesting because while to your point earlier, I think it was mostly just like, okay, Western Europe more expensive, which is higher in Eastern Europe. I see now a lot of actually US based companies just hiring in Europe and Eastern Europe because, it becomes like, as everybody becomes, more used to the whole remote thing. It's like, of course, like, why wouldn't I do that? Or even Canada. I mean, even Canada, you're like up in Canada from like the West Coast is already a lot cheaper than if you're an SF, right? So for sure. But I think like on the Europe side of things, what's, the problem is also just like, we said like, okay, well, there's this large internal market, but actually it's not true because you need to like relocalize every time your product, your services, whatever you do, not just from a language perspective, but from a regulation perspective. And it's really like regulation that's killing it, right?
So that's a whole nother episode we should do, which is, especially with the new administration coming in here in the U.S. and, the government in Germany just had a no confidence vote and got right wingers in Italy. And, is the world entering, I grew up in we should have no trade barriers. It's a small world after all.
Mm.
And, and we should, and then that's the best thing for everyone, right? Bring American style, American lifestyle to the whole world. Let everyone be consumers. And that would be good for everyone. I don't know if it turned out to be so good for everyone, but the bottom line is like free trade, right? Let the best country win. Let the best engineers win. If it's cheaper in Portugal, do it in Portugal. But now we're entering, I think, another era where people are putting up tariffs and barriers, and it has to be made here and supplied. It's under chain security. We're going to make sure we have the ability to make our own chips here and make our own silicon here and make our own. I don't know. And it's not the U.S., especially with this new administration, you're going to see a lot of that. I think you're also going to start seeing it in Europe too. Right?
Yeah.
Walls. More
Probably.
silos.
We tend to follow, right? So it's interesting. Yeah. Going back to the silos.
You know what? I think it's actually been in and this move to the right has been in Europe. I think U.S. is a little later to it. Right? If you look, UK went the other way. UK has a Labour government now, but you go to Greece, you go to Italy, you look at what's going on in Germany now. Even in Israel, which, is kind of EMEA. And these are right-wing governments that free trade isn't their calling card. It's protect our industry.
100%.
And so I think the whole world's doing that. The whole world's going this way. And what does that mean for us? Like I said, that's a whole nother episode.
It's
we
a
could
lot of
talk
topic,
about.
but it's very interesting, a game theory perspective as well. Like because like if one starts, then the other one goes. Like it's interesting thing.
Tit for tat.
Yeah, exactly.
Tit for tat.
Exactly.
What did I say? China just launched this week the first. So basically, Elon Musk's satellite, the internet. I forget the name of it now. His internet provider is
I have one.
Starlink. China. So China is launching their own Starlink. They want to put 14,000.
I didn't know.
Yeah, they just sent the first batch up this week. Now, they didn't do a lot of publicity around it, probably because they copied some copyrighted stuff or whatever. Who knows with them? But, but they're so now you're going to have competing satellites, and it's going to be interesting times over the next 10, 20 years, I think, as kind of
Oh,
the
yeah.
world kind of readjusts.
Oh, yeah.
So platform engineering salary, what about compared to developers?
Yeah, we got astray a little bit. So like in general, I think I have an interesting data point here, because we asked people also just like how senior they are in this survey, which I think was very interesting. And this will kind of explain, right? Like the gap between between platform engineers and developers is pretty high, and the reason is that platform engineering ultimately is not an entry job, right? Whereas developers, it could normally it is, right? It's just where you start, and then you're
Right,
a
it's
junior
here to
developer,
there,
and then you
yeah.
go up, yeah. And so we were breaking it down. So out of the hundreds of people that we asked, only like less than 5% has less than 2 years experience. 15% has 3 to 5 years experience. 34% has 6 to 10 years experience. 18% has 11 to 15, and 28% has over 16 years experience, right? So like, if you look at this, basically it's something like 80% is at least above
Or 6 or more years.
Yeah. And then basically half of them is more than 10 years, right? So that
So
tells
how do
you a lot.
So how do you grow new platform? So this raises an interesting question. There's a gap there,
Yeah.
right?
There's a
how,
huge gap.
How do you grow new platform engineers, right? Because getting them to that 6-year mark is hard, right? This is the old, I want to get my first job. Well, you got to have experience before we could give you a first job.
Yeah.
It's a catch-22. How do you overcome that? Or is that
Yes.
like a cliff we got to worry about?
No, I think that's a great question. This is super interesting, right? Because also, and the point that's in the report is like right after that is then you look at the average age of the platform teams, and obviously it's way younger, right? So it's like 10% is 0 to 6 months. Over half is like under 2 years, right? And only like 10% is over 5 years. So what that tells you is like these people, of course, are they have a lot of experience. They don't necessarily have a lot of experience as platform engineers. Yeah, they're recycled, right? So from DevOps, from other cloud ops, SRE, other things. And so I think to your question, right? Like how, there's definitely a shortage right now, I think, in the market. I wouldn't say the shortage is necessarily in people that are able technically to build a platform. I think the shortage is in people that think with this product mindset. Right. And an actual product managers for platforms is a huge shortage. Like I see it, whether it's on our products pipelines, whether it's on, general companies that I consult with, even the very large, people that I partner with, like ThoughtWorks and very large providers, they even have a shortage internally. Right. So they have like all this pipeline. There's a lot of demand in general, I think, in the market for platform engineering. There's just not enough, and there's enough technical people that can build a platform. There's not enough product people that can actually drive the good platforms, basically, and not platforms that nobody adopts or that they're actually missing the point, right? And so I think the solution there is twofold. One is just more education for everybody, right? This is why we rolled out the courses and the trainings, and it's really about raising all boats at the same time. Because you made a point earlier of this DevOps engineers, this unicorn. I also think this technical platform product manager is maybe not a unicorn,
Also
but very
mythical.
close to it, right? Yeah, it's very hard to do this, right? Like, how can you be technical enough to spar with people that have 16 years experience building these things, but at the same time have the soft skills to communicate with very high level with very senior executives, because these are very large companies, but also low level developers, and figure out what they want. This is just and then
that's a very unique skill set.
Yeah, and you have very few of these people, and then what you see is enterprises, when they recognize this talent, they're like, no, you're not going to work on an internal facing product. You're going to work on an external facing product. So I'm not going to put you in the internal developer platform team, right? And so that's where the shortage comes from. And I think so I think for me is, yes, we need to train more of these people and build them up. But I think it's the short-term solution, short to mid-term solution is actually take, all this like existing people that have a lot of experience and make sure that they adopt some basic understanding of this with this product mindset, right? You don't need to become like a super proficient, technical product manager. You just need to, understand, hey, what is platform engineering? Why are we doing this? And like, who are our customers? Our customers are developers, right? You just need to have a bit more, switch a little bit that's really customer centric focus and product centric focus when you build your platform. And I think that's going to get us 80% of the way there.
Agreed. Hey, as long as we're getting stuff off our chest, I got another type of engineer I want to ask your opinion on. And that is the so-called full stack engineer. So is there really such a thing as a full stack engineer? Have full stack engineers become platform engineers? Was there ever such thing as a full stack engineer? God knows they were hiring enough of them, right? And they were paying them good money. But what's your view on full stack engineers?
Well, I think it's from my perspective, it's just interesting to see this industry, just how for how much developers say they hate marketing, how quickly they fall into marketing things. And I think like full stack is just like another example of this, right? It's like the same thing of like people that created DAO said, hey, there shouldn't be a DevOps engineer, and then everybody falls into the DevOps engineer thing, right? And it's just like I think it's all these titles. I was listening to this podcast like a few months ago where this guy was basically running growth at Facebook back in the days, and he was saying, we needed data scientists, except because we had a lot of data to analyze all this thing. Except the data scientist wasn't a thing; they created it, right? Before it was called some sort of business analyst, like something that sounded boring, basically, right? And they're like, no, I need these PhDs, right? That, and I'm going to pay them a lot of money. But the problem is if you package this as like, a business analyst, nobody's going to come, right? And so they were like, oh, they all come from like physics and things, like they like the science thing. So I just call it data science. They literally, that's why, and now you have like, all this curricula in universities of like data science, but like the actual data science thing was invented by Facebook as a hiring tactic, basically.
To make it sound sexy. It's marketing.
To make it sound sexy. And so like, a physics PhD would go and like become a data scientist because it's cool. And they paid you a lot of money. And so I think it's like, this is a bit of the same thing, right? Where like somebody just figured out, I had the same thing. At some point I had to hire somebody for growth as well. And I had this like demand generation lead, and I was getting really bad applications. And then at some point I just put like head of growth. And then like all of a sudden, it's like all this like small tweaks that you make. And so maybe there's one for your social media management.
Full stack. Full stack. For my I've thought about how do I make that social media thing sexy. That's a whole nother story. Yeah. Anyway,
hey, Luca, I think it's just about people making it sexy.
Yeah, it's marketing, my friend.
Yeah, it's marketing.
We're out of time. Hey, we'll be. This is our last show for 2024. Our next one will be 2025. We also have some webinars or roundtables around the Platform Engineering Show coming up in January. We will be publishing all of that, I guess, in our social, if I could get a social media person, we'll be publishing all that in our social media stuff. But this has been a great conversation, man. Enjoy Morocco. Have a happy Merry Christmas, Luca, and a Happy New Year. And to everyone watching or listening to this, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you as well. And we'll be back in 2025. We're just getting started with the Platform Engineering Show.
Yes, thank you. Luca. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas, everybody. Thank you, Alan. Bye-bye.
All righty. Bye-bye.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Anjali Aurora, who is Executive Vice President for Product and Development at Perforce. And we're talking about how to make DevOps infrastructure more efficient because, well, everybody's trying to save a nickel these days. Anjali, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike.
I feel, could be wrong, but most of the developers, when they're building software, seem to think that the underlying infrastructure that they're using is somehow magically free. And the reality couldn't be anything but. Organizations spend a lot of money on the infrastructure, on the cloud computing, the CI/CD platforms, and everything that goes in between. We have so many different DevOps teams in these organizations. Are we just fundamentally inefficient? Sometimes it feels like, the development teams are the IT equivalent of drunken sailors. But, your sense of what's going on here and why are we starting to pay more attention?
So I think it goes back into history of infrastructure and how it was done, how it is done today, and how it will be done tomorrow. And here tomorrow is like 2 to 3 years from now. Okay. So how infrastructure was managed in the past was by IT, but they became a bottleneck for development teams who were doing SaaS, and they needed to move faster as cloud came into being and applications needed to be deployed in cloud as they were developed. So the DevOps teams came into being and they started basically provisioning the infrastructure, and they became part of the agile teams. Now that created the anarchy that you are talking about. The development teams think infrastructure is free. Cloud is like mushroom, right? It's like a forest of mushrooms. So the containers keep growing, the VMs keep growing in the cloud, which means your cost keeps growing. And that's where platform engineering is coming back, which is really centralizing your provisioning of infrastructure through a set of policies, right? Which is infrastructure as code, security as a policy, and your cost controls, where the development teams now can do a self-service, but they are governed by a set of rules and policies. And that is kind of the current reality that organizations are trying to get to, but most organizations are not there. So that is today's reality. So what happens in future is going to become even more interesting, but that's where we are today.
So speaking of the future, we hear all this conversation about platform engineering. Where does that fit in this conversation? Is one essentially a response to trying to wrap our arms around the other, or is the infrastructure just one piece of a larger conversation?
So infrastructure is one piece of a larger conversation, right? So when you think about it, infrastructure is, to me, when we think about infrastructure, it's like the plumbing, right? That all software runs on. You need infrastructure, whether it is your on-prem infrastructure or your cloud infrastructure. And we can keep adding the infrastructure, but in the end, we have to make efficient use of it. And what you will see happening is that these DevOps teams will actually become very reliant on the platform engineering teams, and security and AI and all the tools will make it so that there's a closed loop system where all of the production data, the user behavior, all of the historical knowledge that we have will actually be used in development, production, and in making sure that the infrastructure provisioning becomes adaptive, that anything that we are fixing, whether it is an outage or performance bottleneck or a security incident, it will all start happening in a closed loop system, which doesn't happen today.
To your earlier point, we kind of invented DevOps to get out from underneath the thumb of centralized IT. And so when we start talking about optimization of DevOps infrastructure and platform engineering, a lot of people read that for code of revenge of centralized IT. So how do we kind of get DevOps teams that prize their independence to kind of buy into all of this?
So you will find in most organizations, the platform engineering teams are actually the DevOps teams, which are taking over and coming up with the best set of practices and policies that they are implementing. And these platform engineering teams are more inside what I would call engineering or R&D instead of being inside IT. So IT may still own the infrastructure, but the platform engineering team is usually not in IT anymore. So the control has gone to the teams which are developing the applications.
So they are recognizing the issue and trying to solve it amongst themselves in a way that requires some negotiation of standardization, right? Ultimately, I have to come up with some sort of agreement as to what we're all going to use. So how does that conversation proceed in your experience?
So I can tell you from kind of experience based on like what we see even in our organization, right? So we have IT, we have R&D as an example, right? And in the past, the development teams had to depend on IT to provide the infrastructure, and that slowed everything down. Now we have platform engineering, which owns the platform which the developers and the agile teams actually self-serve their platform from. And the platform engineering team is actually negotiating with IT, with security, which is our CISO's organization, and with development in making sure they know what is needed by each of them, because the IT teams want to make sure we are making right use of the infrastructure, right? They want to control the cost. The security teams want to make sure the infrastructure is secure. There are no gaps in the policies. And the dev teams want to move as fast as possible. So the DevOps engineers who are part of these agile teams work with the platform engineering team to self-serve for the developers. I hope I answered your question. So there is a so think about it as there's a very close collaboration between the IT team, the CISO's office, which is a security team, right? Which is setting your governance and policies, and the R&D teams or the development teams, which are actually creating the applications and then working with the DevOps teams to deploy them.
How much do you think that the rise of AI applications is forcing this conversation? Because it seems to me the amount of infrastructure we need to consume to build the next generation of software is, well, about several orders of magnitude larger than what we had before.
It is. I remember a time when it was you worked on one computer, and now and that one computer was hard, right? My phone has more power than anything that I had, 30 years back. So anyway, that aside, AI is actually, I don't think we've seen the impact of AI yet. AI will actually force this collaboration to increase, and AI will not only force the collaboration to increase between these teams and agile teams, AI will become a part of the conversation. So AI will become a team member, and it will supercharge every team, and AI will take over anything that is repetitive, like you need to repetitive or that requires a lot of grunt work, like, analyzing a log or, creating a test or, doing anomaly detection of from your logs of a security issue. AI will do all of that for you, and it will work with all these teams to give them options to move faster.
So in an odd way, AI creates the problem, but AI will also help solve the problem.
AI will definitely help solve a lot of problems where the teams will focus on really continuous improvement. They will focus on kind of evolving their architectures. They can focus on innovation, and AI will handle things that it is good at doing, finding kind of patterns, predicting, fixing things, giving options to people. Like, let's say they have what is it called? A run book, right? Giving them options on these are the different things, ways these run books you can run to remediate this, and this is the best possible option. And, then your SREs can say, okay, run this one for me.
So, from your perspective, are we on the cusp of some massive rationalization of the DevOps tools and platforms, or are we going to continue just to have our choice? We're just going to be smarter how they consume infrastructure.
DevOps tools of today, if they do not embed AI inside them, and I'm not talking about AI like ChatGPT, right, where you are asking questions and you are getting help. I'm talking about if they do not have AI agents inside them, which are removing the repetitive tasks, providing insights, and helping the humans who are working with them to elevate their performance, those DevOps tools will become redundant. So the DevOps tools have to become very, very intelligent and utilize AI to do things like, predictive insights, do, adaptive infrastructure provisioning, do like AI augmented security. And I believe that's what DevOps tools will do. And they will be DevSecOps tools. They will not just be DevOps tools.
So, what do you anticipate will be the biggest challenge to accomplishing all this? Because on paper, at least, it all sounds perfectly reasonable, but people are people. So, what do we got to do to make it happen?
So the challenge we will have is the mentality of the people, the culture of these teams, and the appetite of the organizations to adopt AI. There is a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? People are scared of AI, right? They think it will take away their jobs. They are also scared about hallucinations of AI. They are also scared about, what kind of data is AI using. So we will have to get people comfortable with that. We will have to make sure, the organizations have a culture of accepting AI as a team member. Governance will be very, very important. Anything done with AI has to have very high level of governance. I think humans need to understand, and I'm talking about any human being, and this is not just in DevOps, this is in any area. If they use AI as a companion, as a trusted partner, they can elevate their performance. And any team which uses AI can elevate, they basically supercharge themselves. And I think that's a cultural shift organizations will need to make. But again, governance, the risk tolerance, making sure what they are using is safe, that I think organizations which are embedding AI will have to make sure they can convince their consumers of that.
So, do you think that we will soon be deploying a lot more software than we used to, faster than ever? Because there's a lot of people saying, with AI right now, we're writing a whole lot more code, but it's not really making it out the back end necessarily in terms of more applications. So, when do we see the benefits?
I'm going to be careful about what I say here. Writing a lot of code is not the same as having useful applications that solve a problem people want solved, right? So I think we will see a lot more business relevant applications come out that will solve big problems, and AI will not only help in creating them, it will also help in providing better outcomes. I do think we are a few years away from where the velocity of that will increase, because there's a lot of experimentation going on right now, and people are just generating things for generated to just say that we are using AI. But to build something useful takes a lot of thought, takes a lot of research, and you have to validate it with customers.
Mm-hmm. So let's bring this full circle. Do you think that once we start rolling those applications out, that there'll be more evaluations of how efficiently the code is actually consuming the infrastructure, and we will measure developers on that much more so than we have in the last, 3 decades?
I've thought a lot about efficiency of other functions, like, when you think about there's developers, there are testers, there are DevOps, SRE. I've given it a lot of thought on testers, DevOps, and SRE. I think those are the ones where we will have the first impact of efficiency and what they do. My gut says developers will be the last ones, just because it's kind of you do a shift left and they are on the leftmost. But eventually, it's not only going to be the efficiency of developers. Actually, there's going to be efficiency of product people as well. Product managers, designers who are actually designing these applications or coming up with requirements. Everything will be measured, and you will be able to say how efficient were we from requirements to delivery, which is really hard to do today.
Folks, no one's quite entirely sure how well this is going to play out, but there's one thing for certain. Change is coming. And at the end of the day, somebody's going to start measuring the impact of that change, so be prepared. Anjali, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Mike.
And back to you guys in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hello, my name is Chris Blask. I am your host again for another episode of the Inevitability Curve, where we take issues, very specific, very general issues, look back at where we've been with these issues in the past, try to figure out where we are today, and with any luck, get some idea of where we may be going in the future. So with me today is a very dear friend, Bill McGee. Bill, how are you?
I'm awesome, Chris. How are you doing?
I love life. Where in the world are you again?
Right now, I'm in a little town called Alpine, Utah, and we're on the verge of a winter storm warning headed our way, and so we're in the throes of transitioning from fall to winter.
Transitioning, and I think that's, as we're talking about in the degree, I think that's going to be sort of our topic. We'll see where it goes, but as everybody knows, so this, in future. We're recording this after the two hurricanes, Helene and Milton, hit Florida in the southeast. Hurricane Milton passed over Mark Twain and Sam Clemens. The solar-powered Starlink-enabled odd vessels I have north of Cape Kennedy at the moment. So I'll be leaving in a few days to go deal with those, a little bit of damage, sail in down to the Keys. And at the same time, we're also, the whole world is sitting here a couple days later saying, did we just catch a 20-story falling stainless steel water tower from space before it hit the ground? Right. SpaceX has done this amazing feat of launching the fifth test flight of their Starship development process. For anybody who's missed this, it's a two-stage thing. Where one stage goes up, is basically like a really long runway for planes. You can think about it that way. It just goes up, and then the other spaceship that then goes up in space goes wherever those things go. And then this bloody thing came back and landed. And did you see that?
Yeah, I did. It was remarkable. I mean, it landed right on the landing pad, the launch pad.
Yeah, and with the two little pins on two little rails, like two mechanical chopsticks that were perfectly timed with AI and on the ship itself, on the arms. Anyways, we're at that point. So if this seems interesting conversation, it's not just because Bill and I will do that anyways. We're in a funny times, right? And again, as we're saying in the agreement, we look back. And maybe the topic today is change and transition. You're a student of ancient history, religious texts, and so forth, where we've been as a human culture. And anybody who looks back that far sees that we've gone through phases. And those phases were typically separated by transitions, which themselves are historically always noticeable. We're there, and it's a big cliche to say that our entire lives have been into one of these big transitions from the industrial age to the cybernetic age, or where we're going. But right now, right, this today, this year, last year, the last 3, 4, 5 years, the next 3, 4, 5 years feels particularly cruxy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The last time we had a big transition like this, I think, was in the end of the 19th century, where you had Darwin, and you had changing science, and you had Freud changing psychology, and you had, or even inventing psychology to a large degree. You had literature changing, you had art changing, you had music was in a big transition. All of those things were all kind of happening at the same time. And that seems to happen quite often, right? We didn't just invent the car; several people invented the car at the exact same time, right? And so history tends to kind of lead to these things where everything's in transition, and we're in one of those things right now where we're in a huge social transition, we're in a huge political transition, we're in a huge technological transition. Art is changing dramatically, because what does it mean when art crashes into the digital world? Music, the whole music industry has undergone a dramatic change in terms of how you create it, where you get it, how you monetize it, all of that. So it's this global shift that's happening, and it's creating a lot of tension and a lot of energy, good and bad, at the same time, and we're seeing it everywhere, right? It's reflected in our daily lives, in the economy, and in our political structures and everything. Religion is undergoing a dramatic shift right now, and that's creating a lot of tension, because so many of our kind of social norms and the standards by which we've always kind of lived our lives, at least for the last century or so, are undergoing dramatic change and shift. Marriage is probably irrelevant at this point for the most part, and which is a huge dramatic social change. So yeah, it's an understatement to say we're at an inflection point.
Well, and I like the fact that you started with late 1800s, right? So and if you put yourself in the mind of those people at the time, right? Late Victorian era, right? Where so much has changed. We've gone from wooden sailing ships to steam and power and locomotion. Our current obsession with steampunk, right? We put ourselves in the mindset of those people, thinking they've achieved, and then just follow that straight path, that linear future, right?
The first idea that God is dead happened then, and that's what threw everybody off, right? Not that I'm not making a statement on whether God is dead or not, but I'm just saying that was the conclusion. Freud and Darwin and those guys, and the religious community, the response from that community was extreme, like today.
Well, and that I guess the point that I'm not quite making here is that standing there at that time, you might have thought you were at this pinnacle, right? And that the future is going to, follow from that in some sort of linear fashion, when really that was all the prelude. The actual turn of the century, 1900, World War I, World War II, the first half of the 20th century, were not, I don't think, predictable in many ways from an 1895 perspective.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of similarities now, we look at the future from where we are today. And I think quite often people are missing the point, as we sort of did then.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really interesting is that being able to predict the future is an easier proposition, I think, than in broad strokes than most people think. And part of it is because we can look back at the 19th century and we can see kind of like where all that was headed and what was going on, and you can draw logical conclusions about what's happening. I talk to people all the time, and they're very concerned and worried about the future and what's it going to look like, and and I think we're on the verge of something pretty awesome.
Well, and on that note, let me, again, you know the story, but for everybody else, reiterate what I mean by inevitability curve, right? And you just said it, right? The ability to predict the future is not that hard. Now, in specific detail, it's almost infinitely hard. However, right, as you think about this, you've seen where we've been, time you've gone through some of those things, whatever it is we're talking about, how that worked out. I think what you mostly can do about the future is limit it. You can say, all right, these things are probably completely off the table. And these things are really hard to see how we get there from here. So it leaves this path ahead where all the really likely things are, right? And
Right. The big question is, how violent is it going to be for us to get to that point?
And by my every definition of violent, I mean, you and I are infosec folks. We've dealt with conflict, for 30 and more years now. We're trying to defend A from B. They have to understand what A and B are doing, who they actually are, what they want, what are the risks. And so it's not typically, it's not kinetic, it is not physical, a conflict and violence. However, we're all part and parcel of the same things. And we've both worked with military infrastructure domestically and internationally and thought through all these things, right? So conflict is standard, right? We're always, and we can take this as far as we like. Individuals, we all have interests and motivations. We want to get through the day. We want to go to bed, not too worried. We want to take care of our interests. And, even when we can work jointly with others, we're compromising, where there's friction. When that gets to extremes, when things get kinetic and so forth.
Right.
Right.
And that's the question I've been considering, right? Is that we've always kind of laid out the future is either Star Wars or Star Trek, right? We either create this utopian society or this dystopian society. And I always kind of see Star Wars as a prelude to a Star Trek future, right? They're struggling for getting past that dystopian existence that they have and creating something where there's cohesion and we're kind of at that beginning right now, right, where it's one or the other. And I think in the Star Trek version where there's a utopian thing where everybody has a place and that's inevitable. I feel like the question is how much are we going to have to go through in order to get to there? So just from an economic perspective, right? Basic universal income makes perfect sense in terms of transitioning from a physical workforce to an automated workforce, and people no longer needing to do certain sorts of things and transitioning to other sorts of activities. The question is how much effort is going to take to get the people who control the capital to agree to give that money to the people. And what's going to have to happen? Are we going to be able to logically convince them that makes the most sense? Are we going to be able to pass laws to make that happen? Or are there going to be an uprising and we're going to just take it? That's the part that's hard to tell, but it's going to happen. We're going to have to move in that direction.
Well, they're taking my philosophy to that point. I think the, revolution rising up material and rebuilding is hard. And it's expensive and it's unpleasant and it's costly and in every term you can either have, right? Which puts it on the banks of what I see as likely futures. Doesn't mean we can't get there. It's just that it's not the preferable for anybody. Everybody loses, right? So I don't see, large capital transfers, and I'm concerned. As you and I have debated this for a long time, between the two of us, I'm the right guy this time, because I kind of like capitalism. I like the idea that everybody can work really hard, come up with some crazy idea, better themselves financially, to have more money and do whatever the hell they want with that. But again, within limits, right? It's like the game Monopoly, that you win by getting 100% of the entire money supply, right? And the situation you have,
object lesson in capitalism.
Right. Anybody that hasn't taken any economics classes, there's this thing called the money supply. It's how many dollars there are. When people start complaining about printing money, what they're talking about is expanding that money supply. So there's a difference between a world where anybody can get very, very rich and have a lot of money, and a world where anybody can have more and more percentage of all available money. Right. I think that's the kind of problem we have right now. I don't have any problem with people getting silly rich, but when we're really just transferring, 30% of all available money from the middle class and people who really need it to people who really don't need it that much, that's where I think we can find some way to have it be a transfer that isn't, the rich.
The problem is we transferred a lot of power with it.
Right.
And so that's the question is I think people are much more likely to give up money than they are power. And that becomes the tricky bit.
Well, let me try to dig into that one right now. So as we were talking about in the green room, right? You and I have worked together for a long, long time, messaging for profit capitalist companies and so forth. And one of the things we both been arguing for, if I'm not wrong, is that it's actually good capitalism to be honest and transparent and really, really clear about what you're doing and not doing as a company, right? That I'm here to hopefully
and we've competed against companies that aren't.
Right.
And
and we won.
Over exactly.
And over, right? So Bill and I met in the early firewall days, early 90s. Bill was one of my best, firewall resellers with the Borderware firewall. Talked me into moving to Utah. We went down there. I joined Cisco, you joined me, ran the firewall business there. Everything followed along since then. But that opportunity of the late 90s to say, okay, yes, we're a big corporation. Yes, we're a big for-profit corporation called Cisco, right? We're selling almost all of the, internet hardware on earth came from us. And Bill and I were selling the firewalls. And, here's I will continue not to mention the name, but you'll remember this. There was a vulnerability found in the Bix firewall, and it was real, and it was bad. And there was an individual, researcher that found it. And I talked to that person and I said, all right, tell you what, give us 10 days so we can get a fix out there, get some protection behind our customers. And I will give you so much credit. You're going to be the most famous person, as much as I have any influence on that, off you go. And that person agreed. And then a day later, they published the vulnerability. I have not said their name out once since, ever. Right. But what you and I and the Pix team did is when I put our press release that day, said, yes, there's a vulnerability, as you've heard. Yes, we're aware of it. We're working like crazy to fix it, and we did. And we took care of people. And I'm sorry for soapboxing on this, but when I left Cisco, started a sim company, and the first VC pitch, Parth and Iman and Phil gave, went through all the slides and had this Silicon Valley investor lean forward and say, that $1 billion Cisco thing, how'd you do that? I said, well, we built a team who would die for each other. We were honest with our customers with the market, and we took responsibility and built trust. And this Silicon Valley investor leans forward and says, no, really, you can tell me. It's like it's not a trick. And here we are 20-something years later. You are literally, working for a Fortinet, a big, internet company, a big for-profit capitalist company. And your job now, as you described it to me a minute ago, is communicating with the outside world about who Fortinet really is. And I can only imagine when you say that, you mean it. Like, it's just better, faster, cheaper, better capitalism to be honest and transparent.
Oh, absolutely. That's the whole gist of it, right? And it's painful sometimes, right? Because there are competitors who aren't interested in behaving that way and pretend they don't have problems and like to point fingers but at the end of the day, our growth rate's pretty impressive because people respond to that sort of a thing. Have we had problems? Absolutely. Anything with more than 1,000 lines of code, has a problem. And so how do you handle that? How do you manage it? Responsible disclosure is fundamental to being a good citizen, being a good member of the community, and playing a responsible role. And one of the things I've loved about our careers has been that while we've worked for, you know, wildly successful capitalist organizations, at the core, at the heart of it, is still a measure of altruism. The idea of we're trying to help and protect people from a system that is largely, out of control and far more dangerous than I think most people have any real idea. And I love that. I love being in that spot.
Well, let me try to put these threads together. So as we're talking about here, you and I have been saying these things for 20, 30 years in exactly those places where, our peers at the time are like, no kid, you don't understand. This is real business. And we can't go telling the truth all the time, everything else. Yeah. And we've been right. Now we're in this world where SB Mowing, shout out to SB Mowing, that content creator that mows lawns for free, makes a lot of money on the YouTube, so forth. But people get their yards cleaned up, and they do. And it's actually good for them, right? And this person gets compensated. And I think we've all gone through this, let's say the last 3 years, as all of us, we'll just pick on people our age, we're getting used to this. We're watching a lot of this stuff. We're saying, okay, is this a scam or is this real? And I don't know I can't even remember his name. Right? There's this individual who does this SB Mowing thing. I think they were the first ones to really go viral with that. And there's a couple others now. Good for that. But they're real, right? They're a real person who really is doing this. They have a landscaping company. They thought it would be good for their business, good capitalism, to do good works, actually do good works, and not fake it because that's high risk. And so just actually you go do something nice. And it works. And that's just the first example in my head. And there are counterexamples. There's, the giving money to homeless people, right? The channels and content creators. That's a tricky subject. Are you getting rich off of poor people, or are you actually taking your platform to actually help them? We're all, I think, individually and culturally processing that. How do we determine your intent? But if you're doing good works and it's easy to process, because I can't think of how you can be faking this, then you'll do well. You'll do well in a capitalist environment. And I think that points to the future. The shorter term, the next years and decades, I worry about because I live through those. My kids are going to live through those. But I think we've seen in our little experiment over 3 decades a change from everyone in the business world believing that it's a little rigged, and at least, and you got to keep it that way, to over and over again, and now quite often, demonstrations in the public space that your best business interests are being honest and being decent and being moral, and being ethical, and not pretending.
Well, it is a really good example. My daughter, Heather, owns a company called 17 Asset Management that's going, they've gone public. They sell investment opportunities. And basically the whole idea is they've created a series of investment tools that allow organizations that want to invest based on the UN 17 charter things about human development. And so there's the question is, if I'm going to invest my money, do I invest it in ways that, I just don't want to know how you're making that money and how or are we going to try and invest our money in ways that also do good? And the movement shift towards that has been pretty dramatic. There's this huge move towards that. She had a conversation recently with one of these, billionaire hedge fund managers who said, I hate everything that you're doing. I hate this. Because at the end of the day, it should just be about how I'm going to make the most amount of money, and there should be no morality involved in it. However, all of my customers want to do this, and so I need to know how you're doing it. Right. And so kicking and screaming, the old guard is coming along, and all the millennials who are in charge of their companies now, they have this vision of, if we're going to make money and we're going to invest our money, let's do good. How do we do this for positive? And so she's in the catbird seat right now because she's at the place where we said, oh, let me show you how to do that. And it's really exciting to watch this company explode as they as this opportunity gets out into the marketplace. And so I think you're right. I think that's now. Is there a lot of people pushing against it? Absolutely. Politically, and what's really ironic to me is that all of the disinformation and the anger, the frustration, and the pushing and stuff is coming from the community that had all of the power, which is largely the religious side of things, are the ones who are the most up in arms and the most likely to not be telling the truth or doing the things that are the most uh, above board in terms of um, um, in terms of those things. But as you said, I'm as a history of that sort of thing. This is not the first time that's happened. When the church becomes the catalyst for resistance to good change, and it's because the power dynamics are shifting.
Well, in the Terry Pratchett, one of my favorite authors, the old Discworld thing and so forth. He does this a number of times, throughout his books. But it's the awful irony, that doing good things is good for me. Right? Can I just do a selfless act? Can I just do something that has no benefit for me whatsoever? No, sorry, you can't. And in fact, as we're talking about here, even at the corporate level, if you're honest and transparent, and corporations are made of people, there are human beings in there, then people are generally moral creatures, and we actually will be more productive and therefore more profitable to our company if we're happy, if we're feeling good about what we're doing and whatnot. And again, you can tell me, what's the trick, right? There's no trick, right? In fact, trying to fake sincerity and moral and ethics and so forth, this takes a lot of work. It's really, really hard. That's called acting. It's a whole, realm of expertise that most of us don't have. Turns out it's just better, faster, cheaper, and therefore more profitable and competitive, making you more productive to be decent people, right? And
the problem is that most of our economic models don't include that. They're based on the notion of self-interest and purely self-interest, and the idea of altruism isn't calculated into the model. And so, but that's real, and it's kind of the flaw in a lot of economic modeling, is that people are just going to try and do the right thing for no personal benefit whatsoever.
Well, then, but I think, as we get brutally pragmatic about this, going forward, we have to actually build it in. We have to factor it in. And, as I think
that's
about
what
it,
Heather's doing in her company, right? They're accounting for that in their whole business model. That's why it's so radical.
Well, right. Yeah. But I think one of the things that makes it difficult is we're caught on two sides, because if you're really trying to be moral, ethical, and so on and so forth, you don't want to think about your self-interest. You just want to do things. But your self-interest is there, and it always is.
Oh, that it never goes away.
So I think on that side of the equation, making it okay to be comfortable with saying what your self-interest is. And saying, well, in the security community, this is a huge issue. If you're a part of a working group, in some standards organization or whatever, and you're seen as too self-promoting, it's over, right? Your ability to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve is gone.
Oh yeah, that's a delicate balance that I spend a lot of time on in my current position. Is this finding the spot between saying, "Hey, we've got a really good solution and we can really, really help you," without over patting ourselves on the back, right? And over self promotion is a death knell. And we've seen that. You and I both seen that, where companies come in and they go like, "We're the best thing since sliced bread, and we're going to change it," and they go, "Yeah, and they go away."
Well, but again,
but I like what you said about being honest about what your self interest is. There's no one's. I think very few people carry an illusion that self interest isn't a powerful driver in the things that we do, and so. But being honest, articulating that doesn't really upset people like you might think it does. My self interest is we want to make a whole lot of money doing this, and we want to empower our employees, and we want to be able to let people go on vacations and buy their own homes and do all the things that we want to be able to do. But at the end of the day, our top priority is this other. I mean, we're all coin operated, but being open about that is part of that responsible disclosure process.
Well, I think that's, that's a good place to end the conversation as possible, because I think that is the future. I think that's the inevitable mean-free path. It's this at the center of the likely probabilities is it ends up being much more and more and more. It continues to be profitable, personally and corporate and capitalistically and morally and ethically, to be really transparent about why we're doing things, right? And that it's okay to have self-interest, and as long as you're clear on what they are, right? And you're not trying to fool anybody, and then it comes down to our behavior. It's like, personally, or as an organization, if you want to then go out of the market and the worker groups or whatnot, say, these are my self-interest, and to pursue them, I'm going to call you all stupid and say I'm smarter and take all the oxygen. Give it a shot. I don't think it'll work.
Yeah, but we've just seen recently, over and over again, and it's even in the technology space that you end up in jail.
Yeah, consequences to actions. Who would have thought? So, I know the two of us can go on forever, but
right, yeah, I was like, we're just getting rolling,
right? But our time is not. Right. So with that, any last thoughts you have? Do you think we're going into a positive future, or
I think that the last thing I wanted to say is that most of the stuff that we're dealing with is neither good nor bad, right? I get asked all the time, people are afraid of like AI. It's going to be scary, or it's going to, and AI is neither good nor bad. Its potential for misuse is high. But at the end of the day, we'll only put up with that for so long. And I think that's the answer. Is the short term, can you make a lot of money scamming a lot of people using AI? I'm sure, absolutely. But is that a long-term strategy? Is that a reliable strategy? Is that no? That's just we won't put up with it. And humans have a tendency to not want to put up with that. And I think that's kind of the positive thing that drives me, my optimistic outlook for the future is we eventually will just not stand for it.
Right. We drive back towards the center, right? As I tried to describe this whole inevitability curve concept, the best I can say about the bumpers, the sides of like the future is full of a lot of we don't want. Folks just don't like. We don't, and it's not a specific thing. Is that we get closer and closer and more often in spaces where there's just, we can't tell what's going on. The disinformation world today, right? This is not a partisan issue, right? You and I both have plenty of friends on all sides of this, political spectrums. Everybody's sick of it. Nobody wants to live in a world where we really can't tell what's real or not. So the driver to go back to the center, is building on that side. Nothing's driving us farther in that direction as far as, large, demographics and social tendencies, right? The tension is pushing us away from that.
I think so. At the end, there are individuals who clearly want to continue to create confusion because you can create a power base out of that, right? You can, but it doesn't last. Those things don't last. I think we're seeing a trajectory already where our fear about certain shifts in our culture, they've reached kind of their zenith. I think we've gotten to a point where I think people are pretty sick of this chaos.
Thisness. Right. All right. With that, thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone, for coming along for another wild ride. We'll see you again.
Welcome back to Techstrong Unplugged. My name is Cassandra Chin, and today we have Abdel Sigiwa.
Stop.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, Abdel Sigiwar. Hi, everyone. I am a developer advocate at Google. I am originally from Morocco, where we are shooting right now, but I live in Stockholm, Sweden. So,
how did you get into technology?
Oh boy, that's a very long story. I guess the getting into technology was when my father bought me a computer at 14 years old. That's the first time I had a computer, and I was like when I was a child, I was quite curious child. I was quite like I fully dismantled my parents' TV that they bought like 6 months after they bought it. I just opened it because I was curious to see how it works from inside. And so back in the days in Morocco, it wasn't very common to have internet at home, so we would go to cyber cafes, which I think they don't exist anymore. So I spent a lot of my times going to cyber cafes, learning how to code, mostly C++, and coming home and applying those learnings on my home computer. And so that's how it started. And then eventually I finished my high school, and I was not a really like brilliant student, which is kind of related to your keynote yesterday about you don't have to be a genius to be in computer science. So I went to what we call them here a trade school. So it's the kind of schools where you would learn how to be a plumber or to be like a woodworker. And those schools also do computer science, right? It's a 2 years degree. So it's an associate degree, I think, in America, where you would just learn like a trade. So my first 2 years was telecommunication. So a lot of low-level electronics, some programming. I did some assembly, which is wild. And then after that, I went to another school, which is kind of the same idea. I did another 2 years of programming, so pure programming. And then after that, I went and got a master's in computer science. And and then during this entire year, I've been coding, playing with computers, playing with electronics. I am still a big fan of hardware, generally speaking, like low-level electronics. And that's how it went.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on like education and speaking?
Yeah, so I'm a developer advocate now since almost 2 years. And before that, I've done like public speaking. I've delivered content in various forms, podcasts, videos, whatever. And I fundamentally believe that a developer advocate is a part-time educator, because a big part of delivering content, even if it's technical contents, is you have to wrap it in a story. And to be able to build a story and build the content for that story and make the content make sense and make it clear and be articulate, you have to have like a sort of an education approach to it, not in the academia sense. I'm not talking about like standing in front of an auditorium and talking for 4 hours, but you still have to have the same approach, the same way of structuring your content, structuring your talk, making sure that you are hitting on all the basics so you don't like lose the audience. And I myself had a job as a part-time teacher in one of the schools I've been to. So I was both a student and a teacher, and I was teaching like programming. So I taught C++, I taught algorithms for 6 months. I did not like it that much. I think mostly because as an educator, you don't really make that much money, which is kind of sad. But I think that's kind of helped me learn the skill of how do you teach people stuff, right? And I think that's quite important if you are going to be in a situation or in a position where you're addressing a public and you're like, broadcasting some content to them, whether it's like physical through like conferences or even online where you are doing stuff on videos or podcasts. So I still today, when I am shooting YouTube videos, I would still go and structure my contents in a storyline and write the points that I want to hit and make sure I hit all of them. I don't always script my talks. I very rarely script my talks. Videos is a different story because you kind of have to script them, especially if you have a fixed amount of time that you have to like do this video in. And so I think that like having some sort of experience of being an educator is important if you're going to educate developers on technical concepts, basically.
What kind of videos do you shoot?
We have our own YouTube channel on Go Cloud Tech is called, and we do mostly videos about like very short videos, like 10 minutes, about usually it's about one specific feature of one specific product. So we would just like go, here is how to use this product to achieve this particular use case. or here is how to do this particular thing in these particular products, right? And then the longer formats we do are usually podcasts. So I co-host a podcast called Kubernetes Podcast by Google. And in that podcast, we do 30 to 45 minutes interviews where we talk with people. And that's slightly different formats because it's more like free-flowing conversation. But you also have to be, again, the education part of it is that you have to be able to improvise, because we don't want our podcast to be scripted, because then it will feel kind of mechanic or robotic. But we still want to be able to like ask follow-up questions and, you know, like kind of like work with the material you're receiving from your guests to like drive the conversations. And that's also, I think, is part of what educators do. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. How's your involvement with the Moroccan community?
Oh, so I'm involved with, I've been part of the community for a very long time, although I live abroad. The biggest community I'm involved in is called Geeks Blah Blah. So it's a community that was started by Mohammed Abu Layth. So it was an online community. It came from a previously existing community that used to be called Facebook Developer Circles, which doesn't exist anymore. And then they kind of like rebranded it to Geeks Blah Blah. So Geeks Blah Blah is an online community. They do an online conference every year called Blah Blah Conf. And it's essentially, it's 100% Moroccan dialect. So pretty much most of the content is in Moroccan dialect. So I help them. I am on their live stream sometimes. I do talk at their conference. I help them find guests, find interesting people to talk to. They have actually they have a series which I was on a very long time ago called Moroccan Success Stories, which is essentially stories of Moroccans that like made a career for themselves. And because I travel a lot and I meet a lot of people, I try to like find people all over the place to be guests on that series. But yeah, generally speaking, just like participate, try to help, be as helpful as possible.
Do you think that like having the learning software through the Moroccan dialect helps bridge the gap between like language and coding?
I do believe so. So like for the background story, Morocco used to be colonized by France. So that's why we speak French in this country, right? And when I did my studies, I did most of my studies in French. And I also worked in a company where the main spoken language was French, right? I am noticing more and more that the upcoming new community is kind of more leaning toward English, generally speaking. But I think that's like, if you are trying to approach the people who are already in the computer science space, then using English is fine. But the community is also trying to approach those who are not there yet, those who are like thinking about it. And for that, I think speaking in a language that they understand is important. The funny thing is even if the content itself is in Moroccan dialect, the technical terms are still in English because you cannot like always translate them. But at least like explaining stuff in a language which is easily understandable by everyone, I think is important in bridging the gap between the tech world and those who have no idea what the tech world is. They just hear words like developer, DevOps, cloud, and they want to understand what these are.
And do you think there's a lot of job opportunities for software development in Morocco?
Yes, we have. That's how I started my career, right? We have quite a lot of people doing computer science or development, generally speaking. A long time ago, it used to be mostly consulting companies. So companies that are French or American that like open their offices here, hire local talents, and then they would work on projects abroad, is either in France or in the US or in, French-speaking Canada or something like that. But over time, even big tech companies now are implementing themselves in Morocco. So we have a huge Oracle office here in Morocco, in Casablanca. We have IBM, we have Microsoft, we have even AWS. Actually, they have an office here, or they acquired the company that had an office in Morocco. So now it's not that company anymore, it's IBM. The company originally is French, but they had a satellite office in Morocco. So when they acquired them, they all become part of AWS. They have, and then you have a lot of other smaller companies that are actually products companies, so making tech products. And then still quite a lot of consulting. A huge part of the tech scene is front end in Morocco. React is huge here. Next.js is quite big. Angular as well. C#, a lot of Java, a lot of Azure, Azure Cloud and AWS Cloud. So yeah, quite a lot of opportunities.
Do you think the tech scene has been growing over the years?
Definitely, yes, I think so. Because we have a lot of schools teaching engineers, teaching computer science. So I think that the scene have been growing tremendously. And now we even have like a ministry of digital transformation that is tasked with moving the country toward like being more online and moving away from paperwork.
I think that's cool.
Yeah, it's we'll see. It's moving in the right direction. It's moving slowly to my taste, but it's moving in the right direction.
And for the education part with like computer science here, is it mainly universities which have it? Or do you know if they're teaching lower level kids any technology?
So that's a very interesting question. Used to be mostly universities, and used to be that in order to go to computer science, you have to follow the traditional, the traditional like high school degree, bachelor degree, master's degree, etc. In parallel, there was the school where I went, which is this trade school I talked about, this associate degree, right? But recently we have we had a school opening up called 1337, so LEET. That's such a nerdy name, and it's basically a peer learning school. It's a concept that exists in France called 42. Again, another nerdy name. Which essentially the way it works is that they get people in without, like, if you want to sign up, you don't have to have any education background. You don't have to even have, I think, a high school degree. You sign up to the school. They do like a pre-selection. They do like an intensive boot camp for, I think, few weeks, and then they select the people who they think they have potential. The program lasts 2 to 3 years, and during these 2 to 3 years, you are on a peer learning program. So there is no formal teachers. There are no classes. You have like a roadmap that you have to follow to learn, and at the end of each step at that roadmap, there is a project, and you have to finish the project and get your projects peer reviewed by your peers. So it's just people teaching each other. So it's not like a typical bootcamp as in North American bootcamp where you have like a 6 months and you become a full stack developer. But this is a bootcamp in the sense that it's kind of the same setup, except that there is no teachers, there is no like classes. It's like just people helping each other learn.
I think that's a good way to do it, and it gets a lot of people opportunity to become software developers.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it also gives people opportunity to do it in a shorter time. Because if you want to do the traditional path, it would take you typically 5 years, right? Like you have to do a bachelor and a master's. And so this is a great way to like shortcut that and get to the field very quickly. And there are actually people that doesn't even finish the whole 3 years. There are people that would find jobs at the end of 1 year or 2 years. Because like if you are like very curious and you want to learn, you can like speed through the roadmap and either finish it early or get enough knowledge to be able to get a job.
That's really cool that you can kind of speed through it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I learned a lot about like the software industry in Morocco today.
Nice.
So thank you, Abdel.
Thank you. I'm happy. I'm glad you did. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.